Welcome to another journey through forgotten time. Tonight we drift slowly and quietly across the cold gray sea until we reach the moss-covered longhouses of the Viking world. Not the world of firelit sagas or glorious raids, but the quieter, rougher, harsher truth. This is not the story of a hero, but of a thrall, a Viking slave, a life lived in shadows, beside livestock and snowdrifts, under a sky heavy with silence. We will walk through a day and then a winter, then the life of the forgotten. Breathe in slowly, and let your thoughts settle like snowfall. Let us begin our journey back. We'll then turn toward a fiery exile who founded Greenland in blood. We'll peer into Norse beliefs of fate and fear. And finally, we'll end far from the stables at the roaring feast hall of a Viking chieftain, where every roasted swan is served with political tension, so get comfortable. Hey there, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to time travel back to 8th century Scandinavia and imagine what it might have been like to live as a thrall in a Norse household. So grab a snack and get comfy, because this is going to hurt. The first thing we need to get straight is how we got here. This isn't an episode about Vikings. We'll come to them in a bit. First, let's make sure we understand what it meant to be a thrall. As we talked about last week, the term Viking actually just means someone who goes on raids, and there were three types of Vikings. There were the famous warriors/explorers, the merchants/explorers, and people who went on raids to earn money. These three groups didn't necessarily overlap. Someone who went on raids to earn money was likely not the same person who led raids in the Mediterranean and explored Newfoundland. Given that medieval European dentists were not a thing, this doesn't seem like a fun experience for anyone involved. However, based on the evidence that does exist, historians have created a picture of the kinds of jobs thralls were forced to do. Much of the jobs thralls did were domestic. They cooked meals, cleaned houses, took care of animals, and minded children. While some accounts suggest that thralls were beaten if they weren't careful with a child, others suggest that masters trusted thralls with caring for their children. How this happened varied. It could happen as part of a legal agreement. That said, there were ways to move up if you were a thrall. It was possible for a thrall to become a guest thrall. A guest thrall could come and go as they pleased and worked for their master only occasionally. Slavery in Scandinavia lasted long after slavery was abolished in the Roman Empire. In fact, slavery in Scandinavia lasted until the 15th century, long after Christianity came to the region. As late as the Black Death in the 14th century, thralls were used to replace the labor loss due to the plague. Finally, in the 15th century, Danish King Christian I outlawed slavery in Denmark. However, slavery continued in Norway and Sweden for several more decades. In Norway, slavery wasn't outlawed until 1688. In Sweden, it took until 1796. Guest thralls were still thralls, but they had more freedom than other thralls. A small number of thralls were also able to become free men and women. Once they achieved this status, they were technically free, but they couldn't own property or testify in court, and they had to serve in the military. Even so, this was better than being a thrall. It could happen if a thrall was manumitted or freed by their owner, or it could happen if a thrall purchased their own freedom. However, it's likely that female thralls were sexually exploited by their owners. Given that some thralls were bought specifically for sexual purposes, it's probable that female thralls experienced sexual violence at the hands of their owners. She says history is filled with stories of great men doing great deeds. History is full of stories of great men doing great deeds. But behind these celebrated exploits lies the submerged history of ordinary men and women whose lives were filled with quiet desperation. Thank you to my supporters for making it possible for me to tell these stories. Female thralls were also forced to cook, clean, and take care of the children of their owners. It's possible that female thralls were able to use their reproductive labor to make more thralls, but there's little evidence for this. At times, the manumission of thralls was conditional, caning that they could regain their freedom if they served their masters for a set amount of time or completed a certain task. One interesting example of a thrall earning his freedom is the story of Gisli, a thrall who won a bet against his master and earned his freedom. Unfortunately, examples like Gisli's may be more the exception than the rule. In fact, Snorri Sturluson's book, The Younger Edda, makes it seem like it was perfectly normal for thralls to nurse the young children of their masters. The word thrall comes to us from Old English, specifically Bayern, a word that basically means bondservant. You could also call these people slaves. Since slavery was common across Europe, it's likely that thralls from different cultures were brought together in Scandinavia. An Irish slave, for example, might have been able to continue making beautiful illuminated manuscripts. Likewise, thralls from the Byzantine Empire might have continued working in glassmaking or silversmithing. Most people were farmers, herders, and laborers. Many of these people were thralls. If we look at the laws of the Icelandic Commonwealth, it seems that thralls could be punished for crimes in much the same way that criminals could be punished today. They could be fined, imprisoned, or exiled depending on the crime. The most egregious crimes, such as murder, could result in execution. Sometimes thralls who ran away were executed when caught, but the punishments varied. For example, in one case, 2 runaway thralls were exiled instead of being executed. In another case, a woman named Thyra was given a choice between exile and becoming the slave of a powerful man. Slavery in Scandinavia was influenced by Finnish and Baltic cultures, and because there were relatively few thralls in Finland and the Baltic states, it seems that the slaves in Scandinavia didn't work in households like in the Roman Empire. Instead, they tended to be rented out as laborers. Some scholars think that thralls in Scandinavia worked in mines, which is supported by Adam of Bremen's text deeds of the bishops of Hamburg. According to Adam, thralls mined silver in Sweden. Not only did these thralls mine the metal, but they also had to smelt it, presumably working in very dangerous conditions. In fact, slavery was widespread in Scandinavia, although how prevalent varies by region and time period, according to the Icelandic annals. In 930 CE, about 15% of Iceland's population was enslaved. But in Denmark and Sweden, it's thought that upwards of 20 to 40% of the population was enslaved. And while slavery is often associated with ancient civilizations like the Egyptians or Romans, it has a long history that continues into the Middle Ages and beyond. What we usually think of as slavery is chattel slavery. Basically, you treat another human being like property. You can buy and sell them, use them to produce more wealth. And if they're pregnant, you control who they have children with. So if you want to understand what it was like to be a thrall, it helps to know that this isn't the only type of slavery. Chattel slavery, which began around 2500 BCE in places like Egypt and Mesopotamia, grew alongside civilizations. It was linked to agriculture and depended on using prisoners of war, kidnapped people, and the children of enslaved people. Enslaved people were forbidden from leaving their master's land. They were denied access to food unless given by their owners. And if they had families, those families could be separated by sale or other means. For example, if you committed a crime, you might be sold into slavery to pay off the debt of the harm you caused. Life as a slave was hard, dangerous, and humiliating. Slave rebellions and uprisings happened throughout history. But it wasn't until after the Atlantic slave trade that chattel slavery became associated with race. Chattel slavery still exists today, and I'm sorry if that is something you're relearning about for the first time. Now let's go back to the Middle Ages. If we're going to talk about the Viking Age, we have to talk about slavery. After all, one of the hallmarks of the Viking Age was how thoroughly ransacked Northern Europe, Western Europe, and even the Byzantine Empire were by Viking raiders. Slavery played a big role in Viking society. It's thought that many of the slaves taken during raids were sold in the slave markets of the Middle East, and some were taken to the Byzantine Empire. Slavery was simply part of the economy of the age. But as we discussed last week, not all Vikings were fierce warriors. In order to tell the stories of the Viking Age accurately, it's important to remember that the majority of people living in Scandinavia during the Viking Age were Vikings. When we look at the sources about slavery in Scandinavia, we see that slavery looked different depending on where you were. Another Scandinavian source tells the story of King Eric Bloodaxe, who, according to legend, gave his queen a ring made from thrall's teeth. Given the relative lack of sources discussing what it was like to be a thrall, it's hard to know exactly what day-to-day life was like. It's also possible that thralls were forced to use their traditional skills. As far as punishment, we don't have a lot of details. The good news, if there is any, is that it seems that thralls could sometimes be set free. Some thralls were lucky enough to live in households where they were treated fairly. But it was rare for thralls to be treated well enough to earn their freedom. We don't have much information about what it was like to be a female thrall. Finally, let's talk about the ending of slavery in Scandinavia. Let's end this video with a quote from historian Jesse Elbjak. It's easy to think of Vikings as ferocious fighters and ruthless raiders. Sure, that's true. But there's more to these stories. In today's episode, we see how sagas are passed down, changed along the way. Some names linger through the frost. Eric the Red is one of them. They do record events that happened and names that lived, but they can't always be relied on for details. Historians have noted that certain sagas were written during or after the Christianization of Scandinavia, which may account for some negative portrayals of pre-Christian beliefs. To say it another way, if your dad hits you with the belt for playing dungeons, he sailed toward rumors. Toward a place others had glimpsed but never settled. Greenland. It wasn't green. Not really. But Eric saw the opportunity and named it sweetly to attract settlers. Greenland, he said, will sound better than a cracked coast of despair. Not just who they were, but what they believed. He returned from exile with tales of space and promise. Unfortunately, very little is known about their beliefs, since they did not preserve any sacred texts like the Bible or the Quran. What we know comes mainly from archaeological evidence and accounts written by Christian writers, who often viewed Norse religion with suspicion and sometimes deliberately attempted to discredit it. When a Norse person died, their soul was believed to leave their body and travel to a place called Folkfung. Here, the deceased would stay for a time before moving on to one of several possible destinations. For the righteous, there was Valhalla, ruled by the god Odin, where warriors could enjoy feasting and fighting in preparation for the final battle at Ragnarok. So in the next episode, we'll find out what happens when Eric's legacy sails across the ocean. Another option was Fjalnir, the hall of the goddess Freya, where those who died in battle were taken. Stay tuned for more adventures from the world of Vikings. But there's more. There's also a journey into the heart of darkness, literally. For less honorable souls, there was Hell, a dark and gloomy realm ruled by the goddess Hela. Finally, those who died from sickness or old age went to a place called Folkfung, ruled by the god Balder. So the destination depended on the circumstances of death. Each place offered its own unique set of challenges and rewards. For example, in Valhalla, the warriors would be tested in combat and had to prove their courage and skill in battle. Meanwhile, in Folkvang, the residents had to constantly watch out for trickery and deception. He built a home on a fjord. Cold winds blew, cattle perished, but some stayed, and his legend grew. Because of this belief in a violent afterlife, many Norse people desired a heroic death in battle. If his injuries made seafaring too difficult or dangerous, staying in one place might have been his only option. Perhaps he found peace on land, watching the icy waters of Greenland and knowing he had played a part in taming the wild frontier. Dying in battle was seen as a great honor and a way to ensure a place in Valhalla or one of the other halls. Even children were taught to aspire to a glorious death, as we can see in the poem The Death of Ragnar Lothbrok. In this epic poem, Ragnar, a legendary Viking warrior, prepares to face his death. As his sons dress him in his finest clothes, Ragnar tells them that he would rather die in battle than live a shameful life. He says, "I would rather die with honor than live in disgrace." This perspective reflects a larger cultural attitude among the Norse people toward death. Often saw it not as an ending, but as a transition to another realm where their adventures and challenges continued. And dragons, maybe don't write a family saga while mom is reading over your shoulder. His son, Leif Erikson, would sail further still. But Eric, he stayed behind, possibly injured, certainly aging. His life was built on movement, on fire, and fights, but he died on land. Quietly, we think, without saga, without sword in hand. His hair was said to be flame-bright, his temper just as fierce. Born in Norway, exiled to Iceland. Though the Norse religion wasn't technically polytheistic, the main god was a supreme leader, with the other gods and goddesses serving as intermediaries between humanity and the divine. Each person was believed to be linked to a particular clan or family, and the ancestors were venerated as powerful protectors and guides. And that leads us to today's big question. There was also a strong belief in the power of the natural world. Natural features such as mountains, caves, and groves were considered to be inhabited by spirits or supernatural beings. For example, the legendary seer Odin was said to have hung from the branches of the tree Yggdrasil, which connected the 9 worlds of Norse cosmology. Then exiled from Iceland to, always he was pushing toward the edge. We hear about farming, family squabbles and fighting, yes, but also fearsome monsters. And we see why those old tales still matter today. The sources for our understanding of Viking history and culture are limited, and the sagas are our best. Sagas are collections of stories that preserve Norse history and folklore. They were written down around the 13th century CE, though the events they describe take place up to 3 centuries before. They weren't intended as history books per se. Rather, they serve as a literary genre that combines history, folklore, poetry, and drama. In other words, the sagas are like a hot pot bubbling with history, mythology, heroic adventures, domestic squabbles, and moral lessons all at once. Hey, welcome to my channel. As I consider this series, let's talk about how sagas work. Now, this isn't to say that sagas are inaccurate. Even among Vikings, he was too much, too wild, and so they cast him out. This might have been a real banishment. Exile was a punishment in Icelandic law, or it might be an invention of the sagas. After all, making a big deal out of Eric's bad behavior makes for a better story. So let's dive into this tale of Eric the Red, keeping in mind that this story was written down at least 2 centuries after it supposedly took place. Eric was not a farmer. He was a brawler, a duelist. He killed over land, then killed again in vengeance. Where does a man go when no land wants him? West. Always west. Yet even here, he could not escape trouble. And now we drift from the story of one man's temper into something deeper. The Norsemen followed a religion known as heathenry, or the Old Religion, sometimes called Germanic paganism. That said, Norse beliefs likely centered around a belief in multiple deities. Another key aspect of Norse beliefs was the importance of ancestry and kinship. What did they believe about the afterlife? Well, it's complex. Let's call it a multi-tiered system. One common thread runs through all these places, though: a lot of violence. This brings us back to Eric the Red. As his life drew to a close, his adventurous spirit may have waned with him, but Eric was complicated. The saga writers knew that a good story doesn't end when the hero dies. You hear stories of fierce battles, perilous voyages, and daring exploration. Next time on my channel, we'll explore Norse folklore and mythology through one of the most famous stories from the Poetic Edda. Thanks for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Till next time, remember to stay curious. What if I told you that Vikings didn't fear death? You'd probably picture fierce warriors eager to die in battle to earn their place in Valhalla, right? Today we're going beyond the usual stories about Valhalla and berserkers. For Vikings, life wasn't their own. It was guided by fate, or an invisible force beyond their control. Gods, heroes, even the mighty Thor couldn't outrun it. This belief hung over their heads like a storm cloud, shaping everything they did. We're diving into the Viking beliefs about death, their rituals, and their fears. Maybe they'd end up in hell, a realm ruled by the goddess of death. Don't let the name fool you. Hell wasn't exactly hell. When someone died, they didn't just leave them somewhere. These were objects placed in the grave with the dead person. They ranged from simple stuff like food and coins to more complex items like boats and chariots. It was like a menu for the afterlife. By placing these items in the grave, Vikings were essentially giving the dead person everything they might need on their journey to the afterlife. Oh no. They treated the dead with respect. Sometimes they wrapped the body in felt and laid them to rest in a burial mound. That's why they took extra measures to ensure that the dead would find peace and would in return to haunt the living. They often built doors in the burial chambers that were intentionally low, forcing the spirits to stoop as they passed through. Yep, these bloated corpses had a taste for human meat, and they weren't picky about who they chose. Whether you were a friend or foe, a child or an adult, a Draugr could snatch you up and devour you in a flash. And here's the kicker. They didn't just feast on your body. They went for your mind, too. They traveled from town to town with their staffs, reading the omens and whispering prophecies about the future. They saw the Vola as intermediaries between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Let's face it, that's a pretty powerful position to be in. The Vola's power came from their ability to read the runes, interpret natural signs, and consult the spirits of the dead. They were like the ultimate party communicators, connecting the past, present, and future. Being in charge of burying a chieftain was a huge responsibility, and the Volva who stepped up to the task were seen as heroes. But even with all their knowledge and power, the Volva couldn't predict everything. The future was a tricky thing, and sometimes the Vikings' fates were sealed before the Volva even had a chance to read the runes. But the Vikings didn't just seek out the Vola for simple predictions. He was a tough guy, ruling like a boss from 941 to 962, but even he couldn't escape the clutches of fate. One day he decided to take a break from ruling and go sailing. You know, just a little R&R. But little did he know that his last voyage would be his very last. On July 10th, 962, during the Battle of Hurongog, King Olaf met his match. The men from the Jarla Batalla fleet dealt him a fatal blow, ending his reign and his life. King Olaf's death was a surprise to many, including the Volva, but it was a reminder that even the most powerful Vikings weren't invincible. Fate had a way of catching up to everyone eventually. They wanted to know about the big stuff, like whether their crops would flourish or if their enemies would attack. And let's be honest, in a world where raids and battles were common, that kind of knowledge was crucial. If you enjoyed learning about their fascinating views on death, don't forget to show your support. Till next time, stay curious and keep exploring the mysteries of our past. After all, who wouldn't want to know what's in store for them? But it wasn't just about individual prophecies. The Vulas also played a role in major Viking events. When the time came to bury a chieftain, it was the Vula who oversaw the ceremony. They made sure that everything was done correctly, from placing the body in the grave to burying the coffin. Basically, they were the Viking funeral directors. Vikings believed that Draugr could suck the brains right out of your skull, leaving you as empty as an eggshell. It might seem strange to us now, but for Vikings, it was a way to keep the spirits from wandering around and causing mischief. Some saw them as dangerous witches who dabbled in dark magic, and they weren't exactly popular at court. Kings and warriors preferred to rely on their own instincts, rather than listen to a woman's prophecy. But no matter how much they tried to ignore the Vula's warnings, the Vikings couldn't escape the truth. No, Vikings believed in treating everyone with respect, regardless of their social status. They kept track of past events and used them to predict what might happen in the future. And let's face it, history has a way of repeating itself. The Vikings might have ignored the Volvo's predictions, but that didn't make them any less accurate. The Volvo's knowledge of the past gave them a unique perspective on the present, allowing them to see things that others couldn't. They were the Sherlock Holmes of the Viking world, only instead of solving crimes, they were predicting the future. But don't let the term fool you, Draugr weren't your typical zombies. Sure, they were bloated and nasty, but they also had a twisted sense of humor. Well, Vikings believed that it all came down to one thing: revenge. If someone was buried without their permission, or their body wasn't treated properly, they might just come back as a Draugr to teach those pesky Vikings a lesson. So if you ever stumbled upon a burial mound, it was best to leave the dead in peace. Otherwise, you might just unleash a hungry, angry, bloated corpse upon the world. Vikings believed that Draugr could play tricks on the living, like shaking their beds or moving objects around. They also had a fascination with the future, and not just any future, the immediate future. You see, the Vikings had a particular obsession with knowing what would happen next. Like right after they finished brewing a batch of beer, or just before they set sail on a new voyage. They wanted to know what fate had in store for them, and they turned to a group of women known as the Volvas to get those answers. And if that wasn't annoying enough, these bloated corpses could also cause serious damage. Vikings believed that Draugr could wreck entire villages, blowing down walls and tossing carts like toys. Even if someone died in disgrace, they still received a proper burial. But it wasn't just about sending off the dead with respect. It was also about guiding their soul to the afterlife. Other times they put the body in a ship, surrounded by their weapons and valuables. Then they set the ship adrift, letting the waves carry it away. Talk about a grand exit. It was more like a quiet place where people went after they died, neither good nor bad. But that's not how Vikings rolled. They believed in word, yes, but that didn't stop them from trying to nudge it a bit. Think of word as a stubborn mule. If you were going on a long journey, you'd probably want some supplies, right? They were a way to honor the dead and protect their resting place. Building a large and impressive mound showed how important the person was to the community. It was like a giant exclamation point saying, "Hey world, remember this person?" They were awesome. Well, Vikings believed that the afterlife was a journey too, and they wanted to make sure that their loved ones were prepared for it. They buried the dead with everyday items like combs and tweezers because they believed that even in the afterlife, people would want to look and feel their best. They placed beer and ale in the graves, ensuring that the dead wouldn't go thirsty. And they even put animals in the ground with humans, believing that these loyal companions would keep the dead company on their journey. You can lead it, but you can't make it go where you want. You won't want to miss this. So stay with me till the end. They saw them as pure magic, each symbol a key to influence the world. When they carved runes into bone, wood, or stone, they weren't just leaving a message behind, they were weaving a spell. It's like having a secret language that bends the rules of reality. Well, turns out that image is totally wrong. Vikings saw death differently than most cultures, but that doesn't mean they weren't afraid. In fact, let me share a little secret with you. Imagine living in a time when every decision feels like a toss of the word, a fateful twist that decides your destiny. Now, you might think, okay, so they just gave up. Those brave souls who died in battle or doing hard labor had a ticket to Valhalla, a place where warriors feasted, fought, and partied with the gods. Can you imagine a better retirement plan? Now, this didn't mean everyone was thrilled about dying. After all, no one wants to kick the bucket just for a fancy afterlife. But the thought of Valhalla did ease the fear a bit. Take those famous runes, for instance. Vikings didn't just use them to write messages. You see, death wasn't the end for Vikings. Not all of them, anyway. For those who didn't die violently, there was still the afterlife, although it wasn't as exciting. Now, here's something interesting. Vikings didn't just believe in an afterlife. They prepared for it, big time. But what's even cooler is what they left behind. Grave goods, they were called. And don't think for a second that they only did this for the rich folks. Think of it like this. But it wasn't all about the grave goods. Vikings also had special burial mounds where they laid their dead to rest. These mounds weren't just for decoration, as the Vikings believed that once someone died, their spirit didn't just vanish. No, it lingered around, sometimes causing trouble. They also had a word for these restless dead draugr, which means corpse. But the scariest part of the draugr was their appetite for human flesh. But why did these evil corpses come back to life in the first place? The Vikings weren't just superstitious about the undead. These women were like the fortune tellers of the Viking world. When the Vola peered into the depths of time and spoke of doom, people listened. But here's the catch. While people respected the Vula and sought their guidance, they also feared them. You see, the Vula weren't just fortune tellers. They were also historians of a sort. So while the Vikings might have been wary of the Volvo's powers, they would have been wise to listen closely. Now, you might think that being a funeral director sounds a bit gloomy, but for the Vikings, it was a high honor. One example was the death of King Olaf X of Norway. So while the Vikings might have appreciated the Vola's insight into the future, they had to remember that the future wasn't set in stone. Thanks for joining me on this journey through Viking beliefs and superstitions. So what did I miss? Anything interesting happen while I was gone? Oh, just your usual stuff. The goats are eating the thatch off the longhouse again. Kolgrim killed a snake. Astrid and some other women caught a salmon. Niner. Well, he got drunk and tried to fight with a bear. Oh, yes. He's lucky the bear didn't rip his head off. What does he think I am? A shield maiden. An alliance means nothing. I am the shield maiden. You have your orders, Einar. Do not speak out of turn. The alliance with House Raven has been broken since the trading dispute last fall. Okay. And King Harold keeps sending raven banners through the winter just to remind us. Now I keep our people safe and warm under our roof. When spring comes, we will plant new fields and harvest more grain than ever. If Harold thinks he can take all that from us, he is dreaming. Where I come from, people do not bring bread as gifts. It's seen as an insult. You show up empty-handed, and then you ask for bread. That means you're poor. You're desperate. They say it's better to show up with ale and meat. That shows you're a friend. But either way, you don't bring bread unless you're trying to make fun of someone. The sea may call to you, brother, but your heart belongs here. If you listen to the sea, you may drown. My warriors and I, we will give him a hard winter's night. That was beautiful. Let's finish the feast, and then rest. Rest. Yeah. Here's to those who live their lives so bright, their deeds will live on through the years. All right. Come on, old man. Let's go. Oh, and I learned something else. Easy. Wait your turn. Just like your mother said, the feast is over. Let's go to the longhouse. Let's get ready for the feast. About what? You? Who's next? We sing of those who bravely faced the fray, who stood for honor, for their clan. For those who fell, we weep and pray. For those who rose, we cheer and fan the flame of courage, strength, and unity, for those who dared to stand and fight to carve their names in history. Sorry, I forgot. No, you Sigurd. You would have chased fancy dreams across the sea. Don't lie. I've seen that look in your eye. But you are my brother's heir, so you stay here and learn how to be a leader. Learn how to be a shield. This isn't the city. Here gifts are made of wood and iron. That's why I left. There are times I feel like a bird with clipped wings stuck inside the roost. Sometimes I dream of wide open skies, of a storm coming in, of taking my ship out to meet it. And then when it's all over, sitting back and watching the sun rise over a calm sea, yes, I saw the king's banners too. Saw them flapping in the wind like the wings of a hungry wolf. Hungry wolves travel alone. Harold is gathering power. Even the fools in House Coring must see that. This morning I sent 2 men to find out what House Carling wanted. They came back trailing like geese, each holding a loaf of bread in front of them. When they came in, they almost knocked themselves out with the doors. Then they dropped these loaves of bread on the table, and I swear I could hear the silence scream. Everyone's staring at those loaves. So then Ivar speaks up, looks at them and says, "What are you doing?" To which one of them replies, "I thought House Coring liked bread." And that's when we lost it. Everyone started laughing. I haven't heard such joy in the longhouse since we found the old fiddler. Nothing that can't be fixed with some goat sacrifices and patching up the roof. But something else happened while I was gone. Something important. And what would that be? Jarl Sigvit wants us to make an alliance with House Carling. Alliance, he doesn't mean it like that, Sigurd. He's just hot-headed. I know the Jarl means well, but it's not that simple. House Carling. They're as stubborn as oxen, and twice as stupid. My father once traded with them, dealt for rare woods from the south. He came back with the wood all right, but he also brought with him a fever that took 3 of our best hunters. I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. Sigurd, throwing away potential allies, it's not wise, especially now. Don't get ahead of yourself. We have nothing to worry about. I'm sure my brother will sort everything out. He always does, and let's hope he does. Because I don't want to go to war. Not with the Raven banner flying over our heads. Not when my son Einar is old enough to fight. I want to see him become a man without having to spill blood. If it comes to it, though, I will not hesitate. My family has fought tooth and nail to build our home here. By Odin's beard, we will defend it tooth and nail. My father and grandfather before me, they built our house with their bare hands, cleared the land with their axes, chased away the bears and wolves with their bravery. As you wish, mother, as you wish. You should come see something hilarious. Sometimes I forget you were raised in the city, Ivar. That's right. You weren't needed. If you weren't my brother's heir, you would have done the same. It's not that easy. Maybe one day you can. But until then, remember what our father taught us. Thank you. It's getting late. Easy, boy. For glory and gold, for hall and hearth, for every battle won, for every wound that scarred our birth, for every story told in song, for kings who lived and kings who died, for glory and gold, for hall and hearth we drink tonight. Here's to heroes, here's to men who stood strong against the dark, against the frost, against the bite of fear. Tonight we gather in the light, we raise our horns to heroes bold, to tales of valor, loud and long, of battles fierce and victories won. The Viking world was not all raids and roaring seas. It was also slow mornings, aching backs, whispered prayers, and quiet songs beside the hearth. It was cold and loud, and sometimes kind. Tonight, you have walked beside the thralls, sailed with exiles, listened to ancient fears, and dined among the powerful. The feast fades. The fire burns low. And you modern listener, warm in your bedcan, close your eyes, knowing your world is quieter, gentler, softer. Sleep well. Until the next journey begins. Take a moment to get comfortable. Let the hum of the modern world fade as we step into a very different rhythm, one shaped by stone streets. Sandal-clad feet and the quiet groan of centuries past. Each chapter flows gently into the next, a slow unraveling of an empire at its most human. As we begin, allow yourself to imagine the rhythm of their lives, the weight of their days. Tonight, we journey to ancient Rome, but not the Rome of marble palaces or eloquent senators. We begin below the surface, in the shadows, in the lives of those whose names history rarely remembers. You will meet a public slave, rise with a gladiator, walk through ash-covered Pompeii, and dine silently with a Roman aristocrat. Hey there! Welcome to my channel. Imagine yourself waking up before the first light of dawn, not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to the creaking of wood above your head. You sleep in the sublevel of a public bathhouse, where heat from the hypocaust system keeps the walls warm, but the air remains thick and musty. But these things did not build themselves. And for every glorious triumph of engineering or architecture, there were countless unseen workers toiling to keep the city running. Some worked in mines or on public works projects. Others served as executioners, prostitutes, or gladiators. Some worked as teachers or scribes in imperial service. Many of them were sex slaves taken during the conquests of the empire, or criminals condemned to work for the state as punishment. When you think of sewers, you might think of sewage plants and complicated plumbing systems. You hurry through the bustling forum, dodging pedestrians, street vendors, and stray animals. Work was usually contracted out to private individuals who oversaw gangs of slaves. The mining industry relied heavily on convicts who were forced to work in the mines as punishment for their crimes. Even the humblest service publicus contributed to the drama of Roman life. The state demanded endless performances to honor its gods, its heroes, and its emperors. Festivals, games, and processions were part of everyday life in Rome. The celebration of the Lupercalia festival, for instance, commemorated the legendary she-wolf that nursed Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. During this fertility festival, men ran naked through the streets, while women stood by holding a torch or a knife. If the runner wanted to be stung, he signaled with his hand. The women would cut branches from trees and whip the runners. The more scars, the better. Another festival in honor of the goddess Minerva brought together choirs of dancing girls, musicians, and goat butchers. You might be tasked with sacrificing the goats. Other festivals were tragic. The Saturnalia festival honored the agricultural god Saturn, and it was celebrated with feasting and merriment. The 8-day festival took place in December. All social classes participated. Houses were decorated with greenery. Slaves were allowed to gamble freely, and the traditional toga was traded for a simple white tunic. The atmosphere of revelry even extended to the theater, where actors traditionally dressed as hairy barbarians performed tragedies based on Greek models. In between performances, the audience shouted insults at the actors. That wasn't unusual, but during the Saturnalia festival, the tables were turned, and actors hurled insults back at the audience. So as a lowly state slave, you might find yourself standing next to the stage watching this comedy unfold. The crowd laughs. The actor takes a drink from his bronze cup, and he looks directly at you and shouts something scandalous about your mother. The audience roars with laughter. You want to shout back, but you know better than to speak unless you are spoken to. Life in the mines was harsh. Conditions were hot, dark, cramped, and dangerous. Please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Check out my other videos. Leave me a comment. And remember, Rome was never a dull place, not even if you were a nameless, faceless slave. Until next time, thanks for watching. With temperatures inside the mines reaching up to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, miners had to endure intense heat, often resorting to stripping naked to cope with the unbearable conditions. To navigate the darkness, they carried torches made from resin and flax. The flickering flames illuminated scenes of misery. Some miners suffered from severe eye and skin infections, leading to blindness and grotesque deformities. Accidents were common, with fallen rocks crushing limbs and causing permanent disability. Miners trapped underground faced slow deaths, succumbing to exhaustion and starvation. Slave gangs across the empire labored to extract metals crucial for Roman construction. Military and prosperity, including silver, lead, copper, and iron, much of the metal came from far-flung provinces, such as Spain, Britain, and Africa. Under the brutal regime of Augustus's nephew, Caligula, the mines produced enough silver to cover the entire province of Egypt in silver. You don't know where you're working today, but you know that when you dig up treasure for the emperor. Once you reach the magistrate, you hand him the message and wait. He does not read it. He throws it on the ground. You pick up litter, extinguish fires, deliver messages, escort visiting dignitaries, stand guard outside taverns and brothels, and you collect corpses. These are just some of the odd jobs you might find yourself doing. There were also specialized service publicus, like the lamplighter. Every evening, as soon as the sun dips below the horizon, you strike a torch to ignite the oil lamp suspended from a hook on a wall. The bronze oil lamp is filled with olive oil and features a wick made from braided hemp. Each wick burns differently, some brighter than others. As you light the wicks, you move from left to right, illuminating the public space. You keep moving until every lantern is lit and the streets are ablaze with light. He throws you into a jail cell. You are locked up until the next day when you are released without having committed a crime. What? Welcome to Roman justice. As a state-owned slave, you can be thrown into prison without trial. For what offense? Who knows? As the doors of the Tullianum prison slam shut behind you, you realize that if you are still alive tomorrow, you will probably be working as a miner. The Cloaca Maxima was neither complicated nor sanitary. It was a series of tunnels leading away from the Forum, the center of Roman life. The tunnels collected waste from the Forum and the Capitoline Hill and directed it toward the Tiber River. Unfortunately, cracks had formed in the once advanced system, and repairs were needed. You'd use a basket and shovel to haul ash and lime to patch the cracks. The ash would help bind the stones together. You might spread the lime and ash mortar over the cracks, and then pack it down with your hands. When your shift was done, you would take a long walk home, ash falling off your hands, dust caked under your fingernails. The image we have of the average Roman sewer worker comes from a famous fresco discovered in Pompeii, destroyed in the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 A.D. We see two men emptying a bucket into a toilet. The scene is mundane, but the level of detail in the fresco is striking. Note the rope cart and pulley system used for raising and lowering the buckets. Also notice the pointed end of the bucket. It would make cleaning out the latrines a more precise affair. As a state-owned slave, you are assigned to work in the area of the city determined by the aediles, the magistrates responsible for public works. Sanitation is the most basic requirement for any civilization, and the service publicus, doing the dirtiest jobs of all, was the latrone cleaner. At the heart of this gruesome work lay the Roman toilets, the latrines. Communal toilets were situated throughout the city in public buildings, bathhouses, and even along the roadside. Unlike Greek public toilets, which were hole dug into the ground, Roman latrines were typically stone affairs with several side-by-side benches and a gutter below to collect the waste. Cleaning out the latrines was an unpleasant task, but someone had to do it. Servants would sweep the floors and empty the buckets, shovels in hand. They would carry the human excrement to the sewers, or throw it out of windows onto the street below. That garbage then found its way into the Tiber River, which flowed right through the heart of Rome. Imagine the stench of stale urine and feces clinging to your clothes. Now add the smells of cooking from nearby street vendors, and the bouquet of unwashed bodies going about their day. The air in Rome was thick and heavy. Most streets were narrow, and the crowds dense. During the summer months, there was little relief from the stifling heat. Bathing was a necessity, but even the public baths weren't always clean. You can imagine how easy it would be for a newcomer to fall victim to malaria or typhoid fever. Slaves like our friend Marcus would be called upon to clean out the baths as well. In Athens, they would have been known as state-owned slaves or heteroi. The Athenians had many of the same types of service publicus as the Romans, though the Athenian heteroi also included a class of highly educated male prostitutes. Still, it is likely that most service publicus were property of the emperor rather than of the city as such. While the number of slaves in ancient Rome has often been exaggerated, it is clear that the emperors built their fortunes on slavery. From Augustus to Hadrian, from Nero to Marcus Aurelius, each used slave labor extensively in their building projects. Whether it was a road, a bathhouse, a stadium, palace, a tomb, or a temple, someone else's back bore the burden of creation. The reality of Roman slavery is that while some slaves were treated well, others were not. There were slaves who were manumitted, but many were not. And when we talk about Rome's greatest architectural monuments, we should remember that someone suffered somewhere in its creation. If the elite citizens of Rome thought of these workers at all, they thought of them as faceless parts of nature's order. In the Roman view, just as water flowed through the aqueducts and grain through the granaries, So too did slaves move through the city, driven by the needs of the state. The Romans saw themselves as being guided by providence, and they saw themselves as providentially blessed with the labor of slaves. They were essential, but no one cared whether they lived or died. You are a servus publicus, a city-owned slave. You are not owned by a family, nor by a noble household. Your master is the state itself. Your duty is to serve the urban life of Rome in all its vast and unglamorous complexity. Your morning begins with sanitation work. The latrines used communally need sweeping. You pour water down the channels to help flush the waste into the sewer system. Smell is constant, a blend of decay and cleaning vinegar. It clings to your skin. Later, you walk to the Cloaca Maxima, Rome's ancient sewer system. Cracks have formed in the stone. You haul a basket of lime and ash to mix with mortar. No one thanks you. No one sees you. By midday, you are called to serve in the forum. A magistrate demands documents delivered. You run between basilicas, weaving between toga-clad elites who barely acknowledge your presence. Your hands are dry from ash, your feet blistered from uneven cobblestones. Your name might be Marcus, but in the mouths of those who command you, you are simply boy. Evening does not bring rest. You are expected at a public building where an event is taking place, perhaps a minor festival. You light torches, you fetch food, you stand silently as free citizens laugh. You are not permitted to speak unless spoken to. You are not paid. You are not protected. You are one of thousands. This is the rhythm of your life, repetitive, invisible, and essential. As the stars appear over the tiled roofs of Rome, you collapse into sleep. Tomorrow will be the same. In this series, we explore the lives of the forgotten people of ancient Rome. Join me to uncover their stories. Rome was the very first modern city. Ancient Rome had aqueducts, roads, public buildings, baths, sewers, sanitation systems. The category of servus publicus, literally public slave, encompasses various types of state-owned slaves whose job it was to service the public. Some servus publicus, like the anonymous one described at the beginning of this episode, were simply considered expendable. Cleaning out the sewers was another stinking task. The Romans engineered one of the world's oldest sewer systems, the Cloaca Maxima, originally constructed around 600 BCE. As you go about your daily routine, you are jumped by soldiers who demand you carry a message to the magistrate. Mining was one of the most brutal tasks given to servus publicus. When you are not cleaning, digging, or hauling, you are performing menial tasks around the city. As the saying goes, all the world's a stage, and in ancient Rome, everyone had a role to play. Did you enjoy this episode? Now let us shift, not into a higher station, but a different kind of servitude, a more visible one. Let your mind drift to the sound of sand being raked, the distant clang of metal, and the murmur of anticipation in a stone arena. His name was Flamma. He was a gladiator. Flamma fought 34 times. That alone makes him extraordinary. How are you enjoying it so far? Let us know in the comments. And if you love this series, consider supporting us on a crowdfunding platform. The game uses the Powered by the Apocalypse system, which means that everything in the game is resolved with a 2d6 roll under your character's relevant attribute score. Players take on the role of gladiators, professional fighters who perform in mock battles to the death for the amusement of crowds. Renown is gained in 3 primary ways. First, surviving fights increases your renown. Killing opponents can also increase your renown, but only if you do so in a stylish manner. Last, completing quests will earn you renown. Attacks can be made with any weapon in your arsenal, ranging from simple clubs and nets to swords and shields. Scars represent the toll that fighting has taken on your body and mind. They don't necessarily have a negative effect on gameplay, but they do serve as a reminder of the danger that your character faces every time he or she steps into the arena. Defenses include dodging, parrying, and blocking attacks. Special abilities vary depending on your fighting style, and can include tripping an opponent, throwing sand in their eyes, or unleashing a flurry of blows. If you're interested in learning about other historical games, please check out our other videos. Thank you for watching, and happy gaming. Quests are optional objectives given to you by the Game Master or GM that are designed to develop your character and the story of the game. Quests can involve fighting unusual opponents, visiting exotic locations, or doing jobs for shady employers. Social encounters can range from negotiating a business deal to seducing a potential romantic partner. In addition to fighting in the arena, players will have opportunities to interact with other gladiators, trainers, merchants, and even members of the imperial court. These interactions can help players advance their character's interests, but they can also create new conflicts and challenges. Skill challenges are used to resolve situations that don't involve fighting, such as sneaking into a restricted area or persuading someone to help you. With its unique setting, engaging gameplay, and emphasis on social and political intrigue, Gladiator offers a fresh perspective on the world of ancient Rome and the lives of those who fought in the Colosseum. If you're interested in playing Gladiator, you can find the game on a crowdfunding platform. Despite the fantastical nature of their profession, gladiators are real and their existence is miserable. Glory represents the respect that other gladiators have for you. Infamy is a measure of how hated your character is by the audience. Both glory and infamy can affect your outcomes when fighting against other gladiators or engaging in social encounters. Most gladiators were slaves, although free men could become gladiators too, often for reasons of desperation. They lived in a kind of limbo, neither free nor truly enslaved, and had little control over their lives. While some gladiators might have seen their combat as an art form, most were simply trying to survive another day. Most gladiators fought no more than a handful of times before they were wounded or killed. Each archetype has a description of signature moves and combat styles. Next, you'll need to come up with stats for your character, such as strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, and charisma. Finally, you'll pick a fighting style, a specialization, and a background, which determine how you gain renown in the game. So much so that an entire community has risen around the idea of what if people in ancient Rome had jobs. Today, we're looking at a particularly unique occupation. You are a gladiator. You fight in the massive Colosseum, cheered on by thousands of fans. Your fighting style is unparalleled. Your strength, stamina, and skill make you famous throughout the land. In fact, you've been offered sponsorship deals from various merchants. Emperor Nero himself has invited you to dinner. And to top it all off, you're about to start construction on your own private villa. But there's a problem. The bricklayers say they'll need more wood for the house. And where's a better place to get supplies than the latest chariot races? You rush over and find yourself swept up in the chaotic course. Suddenly, a horse takes off toward you, bearing down on you at full speed. Do you draw your gladius and jump to the side? Do you push spectators out of the way? What do you do? This is Gladiator, a historical tabletop RPG. We don't know where Flemma was born or what he looked like, but we know that he was awarded the Rudes, the symbolic wooden sword that meant freedom, not once but 4 times, and each time he refused it. Why? Perhaps he feared freedom meant poverty. Perhaps he no longer knew how to be anything else. Or perhaps the arena gave him what no other life could: identity, admiration, and meaning. Flamer's life was one of repetition. Waking, training, eating simple meals of barley and beans, preparing for death, again and again. The games were not always grand. Sometimes they were held in dusty provincial towns. Sometimes the crowd was small and cruel. He would enter the arena to the sound of shouting. He would fight with a gladius, with a net, with a trident. He would bleed, and yet he survived. Not just once, but again and again. Long enough to be remembered. Long enough to become a symbol. But perhaps also long enough to be tired. He died at 30. So began episode 3 of the 2nd season of Rome. And with that, our series on Rome has reached its halfway point. The Roman Empire is vast, complex, and oh so very fun to roleplay. Gladiator is set in a world inspired by classical antiquity, specifically Republican and Augustan Age Rome. To play Gladiator, you create a character sheet based on one of 7 archetypes, including the Retiarius, a net fighter, and the Secutor, a heavy infantryman. Renown is one of the main resources in Gladiator. It represents your character's status, power, and wealth. There are 2 other currencies in Gladiator: glory and infamy. Combat in Gladiator is fast-paced and deadly. Each player has an action point per turn, which can be spent attacking, defending, or performing special abilities. As the game progresses, your character will gain scars, injuries that can be both physical and psychological. Gladiator also includes rules for non-combat situations, such as social encounters and skill challenges. One of the most interesting aspects of Gladiator is the emphasis on the social and political ramifications of being a gladiator. Overall, Gladiator is a fast-paced, action-packed tabletop RPG that puts players in the shoes of gladiators in ancient Rome. We hope you enjoyed learning about Gladiator, a historical tabletop RPG. Let us leave the living now and walk among the still. Let's talk about Pompeii today. The ruins of Pompeii are world famous, but few know that there is a place much like it. Here in my hometown, there's a museum of Roman artifacts from a place called Herculaneum. It was another Roman city, buried by the same volcano that took Pompeii. In the year 79 CE, it was home to some 11,000 people. There were shops and taverns, markets and brothels, bathhouses and gambling halls, gladiators and chariots, street vendors and politicians. In fact, when excavators found the city in the 18th century, they didn't even find bones. That's because the ash was so pure, so fine, it sifted through the gaps in the skeleton, leaving behind nothing but empty sockets. The artwork shows a couple strolling in a garden. Was this his wife? Their home reveals their character. Frescoes decorate every wall. They show the couple at parties, hosting chariot races, enjoying the theater. A small shrine sits in the corner, contains a statue of Venus, a mirror, an oil lamp, an offering to the goddess. Little girl prays. She turns around to face her mother. The mother smiles gently, but the daughter shrinks away. Did she want something? Did she understand what had happened? These are just a few of the rooms in Pompeii, but they reveal much about how the city lived. Unlike Pompeii, it was preserved under 20 feet of mud. For centuries, Herculaneum slept undisturbed until the water table rose, turning the town into a watery tomb. It was only recently rediscovered, and scientists are still learning about it. In the atrium, a fountain trickles into a pool. Was he dreaming of chasing mice? Or perhaps of sailing the seas? Across the hall, a woman poses for a fresco. She holds a wreath of flowers in her left hand and a mirror in her right. What did she see in the glass? Herself or someone else? Before her, a lyre rests on a table. Who played it? Her husband, perhaps? Or a visiting musician? This is just a sampling of the rooms in the House of the Labyrinth, but they reveal much about how the city lived. But unlike Pompeii, Herculaneum has been little visited. Only a fraction of it has been excavated. Some say this is because Herculaneum is less dramatic. Most of the victims died in one of two ways. They either huddled in the marketplace, seeking shelter, or fled up the hill, hoping to escape the disaster. Their plaster casts tell their stories. One man fell to his knees, shielding his face. A woman stands frozen, as if pleading with the gods. A child recoils in terror. Two lovers cling to each other. One man took shelter under an arch. He folded in on himself to protect his head. Did he seek shelter or die laughing? The skeletons are gone, and the plaster casts are far less numerous. Their homes, gardens, their very bodies, they echoed the life of the ancient city. Others say it's because Herculaneum is more suburban. While Pompeii was the heart of Roman life, Herculaneum was a quiet suburb. Well, maybe it's a bit of both. What you'll find is a city frozen in time. Ancient Pompeii is preserved beneath the soil, while modern Pompeii rises above. People live, work, eat, drink, just as they did 2 millennia ago. Is this a city cursed by history or blessed? It all depends on how you look at it. Bodies are gone, but the lives they lived linger on. Houses were preserved intact, their contents untouched, even their gardens, complete with flowers, herbs, and vegetables. Archaeologists can study them to learn how Romans lived. Take the House of the Labyrinth, for example. Its courtyard is filled with plants, including one used to make wine and another used to flavor food. What did the family eat? What did they grow? They grew oregano. In Pompeii, the cobblestones, the frescoes, the shards of pottery, they echo the footsteps of those who once walked here. Statues of gods and heroes surround them. Furniture is exquisite. A bronze lamp hangs from the ceiling. There are marble tables, silver trays. The paintings alone would have cost more than a house. This was the home of the elite. After 1,600 years, all that remains are the imprints of people, birds, even insects, all frozen in time. It was just a normal Roman town until Vesuvius erupted. On that day, Pompeii was busy. People went about their daily lives. Walls still whisper jokes and love notes in faded Latin graffiti. You can read the name of a tavern, Cupid's Arrow. The acoustics are so good, you can hear your own reflection. Inside, we find loaves of bread in ovens, forever blackened, jars of fish sauce sealed tight. In one corner, a glass rests on a table beside for overturned chairs. Nearby, the bones of a dog lie beside his master. In his right hand, he clutches a coin purse. His left grips a bronze mirror. Was he preparing for a night out? What was he hiding from? Beside him lies an oil lamp, turned upside down, as if extinguished in haste. Tradesmen peddled their wares. Lovers strolled hand in hand through the forum. Bystanders watched a mock naval battle in the amphitheater. But at midday, the calm was shattered. Smoke and fire boiled up from the sea. An earthquake bucked the earth. People ran for the hills. He could save his money and buy himself a tunic or sandals. Maybe he visits a bar to drink his sorrows away. The walls are covered with graffiti, lewd jokes, and political rants. One of the latter reads, "Beware of the dogs." Is this a warning or an insult? Next door, a baker kneads dough. His tools lay scattered beside him. Flour dust covers everything. In another room, an inscription reads, "Here's luck." Beside it, a comb. Was this his lucky charm? But unlike Pompeii, it was preserved under 20 feet of debris, not ash. For centuries, Herculaneum slept undisturbed until the water table rose, turning the town into a watery tomb. It was only recently rediscovered, and scientists are still learning about it. In this video, we'll explore two incredible places where death met life and stories sleep beneath the earth. Pompeii was a city of color, of noise, of everyday chaos. It began with ash, wet and fine, sifting down from the sky. At first, it seemed like snow. Then came the pumice, hot and sharp, rock hard and jagged. Each stone was like a burning ember. People sheltered in place or fled. A few blocks away, Vesuvius rained fire. Entire families were burned alive, their bodies contorted in eternal agony. Others made it out of town, only to be crushed by falling masonry. Still others gathered in the town square, praying for deliverance, but deliverance never came. Ash fell for 6 days and nights. It built up higher and higher, covering roofs, engulfing houses, suffocating gardens. In the end, Pompeii was buried under 20 feet of debris. Its 11,000 inhabitants perished. And yet, if you visit Pompeii today, you won't see victims. You won't see corpses. You won't even see skeletons. When you stroll through Pompeii, you enter a world that's eerily familiar. Stone roads still bear the ruts of carts. One home contains a mural of a man leading a dog on a leash. The house belonged to a wealthy merchant. He was away on business when the volcano struck. But Pompeii was not just for the rich. Ordinary people lived here too. A common laborer might earn 30 cents a day. A young woman sits before a mirror, applying makeup, fastening her brooch. You can visit Pompeii today, but if you do, don't expect to see a ruined city. After 1,600 years, life returns to Pompeii, but it's not the same. Herculaneum, like Pompeii, was buried under tons of debris. The excavations at Herculaneum began in 1738, a few decades before Pompeii was uncovered. But let's be honest, when it comes to ancient history, it's hard to top Pompeii. We've seen the still life of Herculaneum. Now let's take a look at its action. On the second floor, a boy sleeps soundly in his bed. Cat curls up at the foot. Unlike Pompeii, Herculaneum tells the story of how people died. Herculaneum died as it lived, together. The city was destroyed, but its people lived on. You want to learn more about Pompeii and Herculaneum? Check out the links below. You've reached the top. After a long journey through narrow streets lined with shops and taverns and brothels, you've climbed now. Finally, we ascend. Up marble stairs into wide atriums lit by sunlight pouring through the compluvium. Here's the peristyle, and you are no longer invisible. You are a patrician, a Roman elite. Behind you, your slaves close the bronze gates. Here in the heart of your domus, your home, you are safe. She has managed the slaves to prepare this meal. She will keep an eye on everything while you eat, so that nothing is overlooked. This bath will wash away the grime of the day. Your table is laden with delicacies, Bread dipped in oil, roasted meats, fresh fruit. Listen to their melodies, reflecting on the sounds of the city. The atrium is dark. Only moonlight filters through the compluvium. You must use a torch to see. The llamas are dark and silent. Your wife is still sleeping, but you must begin your day. You rise and walk to the cubiculum, the bedroom, and dress quickly. You put on a linen tunic, then a woolen one over it. You navigate the crowds, ignoring those who call out to you, begging for money. Cases involving money, land, inheritance, women. You sit on the bench. The cases seem endless. You listen, taking notes on wax tablets. You may rule, but you must always consider the appearance of justice. Later, you hold court. Petitioners line up before you. Some plead for money, others for justice. You decide each case carefully. You don't always agree with your colleagues, but here you defer to their experience. The senator bows before you. His son stands awkwardly behind him. You ask them in. Once the senator and his son leave, you return to the atrium. Your wife greets you. She has been managing your schedule. You tell her about the senator and his son. We'll need to prepare for dinner. You greet the senator warmly, offering him a seat. You ask about his journey. Listen to his reply. The atrium is dark. The slave at the door opens it. You enter and shut it behind you. The sound echoes in the stillness. You are home. For a moment, you are alone, but even here, you are never truly alone. You must always make visitors feel welcome. You walk slowly, leaning on your wife's arm. She asks if you'd like music. You decline. You walk toward your atrium. You pause to admire the stars visible in the darkness. You are rich, powerful, influential. You own the finest things. But sometimes you wish you could spend a night without anyone watching. You entertain them with conversation, food, and drink. You listen to the senator's requests. He wants you to support his son's candidacy. You hesitate, then agree. You are a source of wealth and power. People expect you to help them. You smile and change the subject. His father coughs and excuses himself for the latrine. The young man blushes and sinks to a nearby couch. Dinner is your biggest meal of the day. You must impress your guests. Your wife is in charge. Servants move around you, preparing. Soon the guests arrive. There is much fanfare. You greet them in the atrium. It is nearly dark. You lead them into the dining room. He is uncomfortable. You ask him about his studies, his future plans. He replies politely. She is beautiful, elegant. She wears a gown of fine linen. She greets the guests. The senator sits beside you. The son sits opposite you on a lower couch. You offer them food and drink. Your wife serves. All goes smoothly. You notice how attentive his father is, how he returns quickly from the latrine. You glance at the door. The young man follows your gaze. You ask him to stay for dinner. He accepts. Do, but not here, not now. You're on your way. You tie a purple belt around your waist and tuck it in. You add a cloak, adjust your sandals. You're ready for the day. The atrium has become cool in the evening air. The scent of night-blooming jasmine fills your senses. You walk away from the noise, seek shade, rest a while, then go home. You lie on your couch, letting the cool linens touch your skin. You are alone. You close your eyes, dreaming of victory. But even here, you are not truly alone. You dream of chariots racing, of barbarians attacking, of enemies falling before you. You dream of power. Entering your atrium brings a sense of calm. You must rest. Your wife asks if you'd like some wine. You accept. The familiar faces of your slaves are reassuring. Today there was no poison in your wine. The atrium is cool, fragrant, quiet. You sit on a couch. The atrium is large enough to accommodate many visitors, yet it feels intimate. You enjoy this moment of peace, but soon it ends. Your wife calls from the entrance hall that a senator and his son have arrived. You sigh inwardly, knowing that your afternoon has been spoken for. You feel safe in your domus. A young slave lies down on a couch and falls asleep. The traffic noise hits you like a wave. You recognize some of the merchants lining the street, the baker, the fishmonger, the butcher. You start, then smile. It was just a dream. You are safe. Your wife is reading. She greets you and asks if you'd like to bathe again. You accept? You ask after their families and buy fresh bread, fish, meat for today's midday meal. Then you continue walking, deeper into the city. You smile. Such innocent beauty. You watch over him. a powerful Roman lord surveying his domain, watching over his people. You are rich, respected, influential. This is power. Your guests arrive. Their greetings, embraces, kisses, pleasantries. Everyone knows their place. Your wife sits beside you, dignified and beautiful. She chooses which guests sit near you and watches over the entire affair. Here you stop. This is the salutatio, the greeting area. Before you can greet anyone outside your home, you must first greet your clients. You did not choose them, but they are yours to protect. They stand patiently in line, dozens of them, waiting for your attention. Each wants something from you, perhaps money, perhaps influence. Some just want to be seen. You greet each one courteously, asking about their families, shaking their hands, remembering their children's names. You are patient. This takes time. Her choices convey a message. Your guests, too, have carefully chosen their attire, their hairstyles, and jewelry. They, too, are making statements. Your dinner is more than food. It is a performance. Your guests discuss politics, gossip about scandals they've witnessed in the forum. You approach the forum and the gladiators practicing in the training school. You walk past, ignoring the spectacle. There are shops everywhere. Some display their wares outside on tables: clothes, shoes, jewelry, perfume. You ignore them. You have no time to shop. You are headed to the forum, the center of Roman life. One guest mentions you were seen talking to a senator. You smile. Everyone at the dinner must be made to feel welcome and important. You are generous with your gifts, and at the end of the dinner, each guest receives a small prize, a token of your appreciation. You scrub yourself with a rough brush called a strigil. The scraping removes dirt and dead skin. It hurts a little, but you endure it. One slave washes your head while another scrubs your body. Still another massages your back and shoulders. You lean forward, enjoying the feeling of release. These moments of relaxation are rare. She asks about your day, listens intently, and then suggests you bathe before retiring for the night. The servants move silently around you, anticipating your every need. Many have been with your family for decades and know you intimately. The street noise fades and the muted light of the courtyard soothes your eyes. Here you can finally relax. Your atrium is spacious, cooler than the street, and the mosaic beneath your feet depicts the myth of Medusa, warning any intruders of her wrath. You dine reclining on couches, eating oysters and figs, sipping watered wine, and you feel very far from the clamor of the forum. Your atrium garden is full of fragrant flowers, birds, song, and buzzing insects. Through an edecula, a small shrine, you see the Lares, the protective spirits of your house. As you eat, you watch a slave girl dance, then she departs. Then someone approaches. It is your wife. Bathing is an important part of Roman life. Slaves fill the stone bathtub with warm water. You strip naked and dive in. Later, you enjoy the taste of sweet wine. You recline on your couch to dine. After dinner, you return to your peristyle. Your wife asks if you would like music. A group of slaves begins to play. But then, it is gone. With a start, you are awake. You leave the house, cross the atrium, and enter the corridor that leads to the street. As you talk, you walk toward the street door. Now you step outside into the morning sun. You blink against the glare. Rome is waking up. You hear shouts, the clash of metal on metal. The forum is a bustling hive of activity. Slaves carry clay pots filled with grain. Merchants hawk their goods. Politicians argue. Orators wave their hands for attention. You arrive at the basilica. Here, cases are brought before the courts. Finally, it is over. You rise from your seat. The heat of the day is upon you. You eat lunch, then retire to your cubiculum. Sleep is a luxury you can afford, and suddenly you are awake. The afternoon sun streams through the compluvium. When you are clean, you are ready to receive guests. They arrive. The senator's son speaks. He tells you that he heard you were interested in poetry. The senator returns. You ask him to stay for dinner as well. He agrees readily. Hours pass. Your wife sits on a chair of ivory and gold. After you retire to your peristyle. You reach your house. And now, as our journey through ancient Rome draws to a close, let your thoughts settle. You have walked through the day of a forgotten laborer, stood in the dust beside a weary gladiator, stepped gently among volcanic silence, and reclined in the opulence of the elite. History, even in its quietest corners, has rhythm. A heartbeat beneath stone and ash, a whisper behind every statue. As you drift into rest, Remember, the past was not just battles and emperors. It was people, breathing, waiting, enduring. Sleep well, traveler of time. Take a deep breath and let your shoulders soften. The hum of the present fades away as we step slowly into a distant world, a world shaped by patties, silent shrines, and the rustle of silk robes in quiet corridors. We begin instead among those whose lives unfolded far from the brushstrokes of legend. This is the Japan of the overlooked and the unheard, the farmer, the rebel, the hidden faithful, the lady of stillness. Tonight, you are not a warrior. You are not a daimyo. This is a gentle descent into Sengoku Japan and beyond. The rhythm of forgotten lives and the echo of choices made in silence. A white dragon, a black dragon, a hero who can turn into a dragon, a demon lord who collects souls. For 5 seasons, we've followed the intertwined fates of these characters. Across a world where demons prowl and the dead can come back to life, and along the way, we learned about medieval Japan. Finally, rice grows really well in East Asia's wet, warm climate, whereas wheat needs more sun and dry weather. As part of this process, farmers would divert streams and build levees, dig canals, and install gates. Then every spring, they would flood the fields with water to allow the rice to grow. Since water also helps control weeds and pests, this system allowed farmers to grow more rice more efficiently. Imagine yourself rising with the mist. Sun has not yet broken through the clouds, but you are already in motion. Your breath leaves small clouds in the morning chill. You are a rice farmer, born into a thatched home built from reed and mud, in a small village near the border of 2 warring provinces. You don't pick which side fights over your land. You are too insignificant to matter. You have no name. You have calluses. Your tools are few. A hoe, a woven hat, your hands. You walk to the paddies. They are wet, sunken, and bound by low embankments. The soil clings to your ankles. You wade in and begin. Seedlings must be placed just right, one by one. Your back aches before the sun has even climbed. You are too busy to worry about anything else. By midday, your shoulders are slick with sweat. A bird poops on your hat. You do not care. The rain comes. You do not care. The thunder booms. You do not care. You keep working. And because so much water was involved, keeping track of the flooding and planting schedules required cooperation among the communities. You grow it, then you surrender most of it. The local lord sends a retainer to collect it. He arrives with a sealed warrant that proves you owe him a debt. You bow deeply, though he does not deserve your back. You do not look up. He does not care about your face. Takes what he is owed and leaves. Sometimes soldiers pass through. They are not your allies. They take what they need. Rice, chickens. Your neighbor's daughter, once. You say nothing. You keep your head down. The roof leaks, but the carpenter demands rice for his work. You mend it with straw. In winter, there is hunger. You chew bark. Mix millet with ash. If a child dies, it is whispered and buried quickly. No record is kept. The village elder marks another death on a thin bamboo stalk. It is one fewer mouth to feed during the lean months. You do not care. This is not a dramatic life. It is slow, aching, and circular. The fields do not remember your name, but they require everything you have. You were born here. You will die here. But still, you rise again with the mist. Because of all this, wet rice cultivation made farming more than just a simple job. It was a communal effort that demanded planning and organization. And so, as people migrated and spread out across East Asia over the past several thousand years, they brought rice with them, which then became the dietary staple of countries like China, Japan, and Korea. So families would pool their resources and work together on large cooperative farms called tannin. While farming was mostly an agrarian occupation, the Japanese elite saw its importance and incorporated rice cultivation into the country's political economy. In fact, rice became a kind of currency, which led to a new type of landowner, the rice aristocrat. That's because rice production wasn't steady. There were always bad harvests and famines. When a harvest failed, the ruling class would step in to buy up all the rice in the province at whatever price it took. Then they would resell it to the people at a lower price. This guaranteed the peasants a certain baseline income, which made it easier for them to pay their taxes. and it made the aristocrats very wealthy. Rice also had a big impact on the shape of these societies. In times of plenty, the local lords would collect more taxes from the rice aristocrats and farmers alike. During times of famine, they would collect less. The goal was to maintain a stable revenue stream no matter how the crops were doing. However, this system required close monitoring. In theory, each family was expected to grow just enough rice to survive and then sell the rest to the government. In practice, that meant that the local lords needed officials called kokuga to watch over the farmers and make sure they were growing enough rice. If they weren't, those officials were tasked with beating that into them. Needless to say, being a rice farmer wasn't all that relaxing. Since it was such an efficient crop, farmers could produce enough food to support large populations, which led to higher population densities and more complex social structures in the countryside. And since it was so labor-intensive, farmers needed to work together in bigger, more organized groups to get the job done. But in our final episode ever, I wanted to spend some time talking about farming. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you thought about rice farmers? Don't worry, if it's been a while since you gave agriculture much thought at all, that's perfectly normal. But in case you didn't know, rice farmers are pretty important. In fact, many historians argue that rice cultivation in East Asia is one of the major factors responsible for the population boom that took place there starting around 2,000 years ago. That's because rice is an incredibly calorie-dense crop that requires relatively little land and water to grow compared to other grains like wheat. According to one estimate, rice yields around 5 metric tons per hectare of land. Wheat yields only about half that. Meanwhile, the amount of land required to feed 100 people for a year with rice is less than 1/10 of what it takes to feed them with wheat. So in places where land was scarce, rice was an efficient way to feed lots of people. It's also easy to store, which meant that bad harvests would result in mass starvation as often as they did in places where wheat was the main crop. In Japan specifically, the introduction of rice led to the creation of wet rice paddies, which is a fancy way of saying that farmers had to build elaborate irrigation systems to water the plants. And the scale of the operation mattered. Small farms couldn't afford to hire many laborers. This system also influenced the way power worked in Japanese society. We're going to explore what this might have felt like by imagining ourselves into the life of a rice farmer living in the Sengoku period, which literally means the Warring States period. You know that your tax is due in rice, not coins. In Japan, they say a person needs 3 friends for happiness: a wife who cooks well, a friend who lends money without asking for it back, and a wise man who can tell the time of death with a cup of tea. The wise man is also called a yugami. In Chinese, yugami translates to death side, the person who walks with death. To become one must study the classic's years of training, reading the patterns and cracks of teacups, the way smoke drifts. The place he attacked was Hanogi, a Buddhist temple in Kyoto where Nobunaga was resting. How did Mitsuhide plan to overthrow him? How did Nobunaga's retainers allow this? These questions have remained unanswered for 440 years. What we do know is that Mitsuhide's men surrounded the temple, cut off its water supply, and waited. Some believe that Nobunaga grew suspicious of Mitsuhide's loyalty. We only know that he acted like a man who had lost his way. A man who could read the signs of death, but could not read his own soul. If you find this video interesting, please share it with your friends. Till next time. He had seen him behave erratically, shouting and cursing at times for no apparent reason. Was Mitsuhide insane? Had Nobunaga sent him to spy on him? Perhaps the Oda Lord had known the exact number of tiles on his roof. He demanded order and obedience. He would have tolerated no disloyalty. Others say that Mitsuhide's betrayal was cold and calculated. Nobunaga was about to set out on a campaign. He was exhausted. His mother was dying. Mitsuhide saw his chance struck when Nobunaga was vulnerable. To save his lord from a humiliating death, he might have decided to kill him and take the blame. Like a loyal dog, Mitsuhide buried his bones. This explanation seems plausible, but it does not explain why Mitsuhide failed to secure Kyoto. He had the element of surprise on his side. He had good timing. He had the support of the populace. So why did he lose so quickly? At some point, Nobunaga realized the danger he was in. But instead of leaving, he stayed back to defend the temple. Some say he wanted to buy time to regroup, others that he wanted to escape. Either way, he didn't leave. When Mitsuhide forced his way inside, Nobunaga committed seppuku, the traditional samurai method of taking one's own life. Mitsuhide had hoped to take Nobunaga's head, but he got only his life. What happened next is also uncertain. We only have tales. The speed of a horse's gallop, the shape of a cloud, the fall of cherry blossoms, even the flight of dragonflies. Then he put the urn in a lacquered box, placed it on a white horse, and rode out of the city. Both men heard about Mitsuhide's actions at Honagi, and they wasted no time in marching on the capital. At the Battle of Yamazaki on June, Mitsuhide's forces crumbled. He abandoned his post and fled, perhaps hoping to find sanctuary in the mountains. But Mitsuhide was recognizable. He could not hide for long. According to one version of the tale, he donned the clothes of a peasant and tried to pass himself off as one of the locals. But soon soldiers arrived looking for him, and when they saw him, they shouted, "There he is, kill him," and they cut him down. Other versions say he was killed by bandits or wandering samurai. None of this is certain. We don't even know when he died, though some sources say it was August. Whatever the date, Mitsuhide did not survive the summer. Its reign lasted less than 2 weeks. His name became a synonym for betrayal, and the story of his death has become a Japanese classic, retold in plays, books, and films. Where he went, no one knows. Some say he headed north toward the mountains of Mino province, where Nobunaga's son would later establish a domain. Others claim he took the body to Osaka Bay and threw it into the sea, believing that his lord would be reborn from the waters. One thing we do know is that Mitsuhide did not stay in Kyoto. He had seized the capital, but he couldn't control it. Soon the streets were swarming with Nobunaga's men. Mitsuhide had betrayed his lord, but he had not reckoned with his followers. They were eager for revenge. Yagami honed their intuition to divine when a person will die. As the saying goes, knowing when you will die makes you fearless in the face of death. The best compliment a Yugami can receive is when someone dies at their side. It is only then that the Yugami's skill is proven. In ancient China, the role of the Yugami was a respected one. Not so in Japan. Not the warrior ethos viewed death as something to be embraced. But death foretold is bad luck. A samurai who knew his end was near might take his own life. So in feudal Japan, the Yugame lived in hiding. They were considered bringers of misfortune. Not everyone believed them, but enough did to keep the Yugami away. If you heard the sound of a bell in the distance, you could be sure death was nearby. This was how the people explained the uncanny knack of the Yugame to predict when someone would die. But there are other ways to read the signs of death, ways that don't involve teacups or flowers or the flight of insects. Akechi Mitsuhide was born into this world, not born to rebel. He served under Oda Nobunaga, the ambitious lord whose dream was to conquer all of Japan. The year was 1567. Nobunaga had taken the young Mitsuhisa under his wing, given him a noble title, and adopted him into his clan. Together they fought many battles, most of them ending in victory. Under Nobunaga's banner, Japan trembled. One day the lord and his retainers were riding through the woods when they came across a farmer tending to his rice paddy. "You work hard," Nobunaga said, pausing to watch the man. "But why here?" The farmer replied, "Because my master requires food." Nobunaga looked at his retainer, Mitsuhide. "Go to the Minister of Agriculture and tell him I want to see him at the next harvest festival." Mitsuhide did as he was told. When the retainer returned at the appointed time, Nobunaga greeted him with a slap. "I asked you to come alone. Why did you bring these men?" I thought. Mitsuhide began, but Nobunaga cut him off. "Don't lie. Do you think I am deaf, blind, or stupid? You brought your retainers because you were afraid I would kill you?" Mitsuhide bowed his head. "Forgive me, my lord. I was wrong." Nobunaga smiled, clapped him on the shoulder, and dismissed him. All the retainers except Mitsuhide left, but the lord did not dismiss him. Again, he slapped him. "This is what I hate about you." Mitsuhide closed his eyes, waiting for the inevitable blow, but it never came. When he dared to open his eyes, Nobunaga had disappeared. His lord's anger was legendary. Many had been punished like this before. Most never survived such humiliation. But Mitsuhide stayed on. Maybe it was because he was young and could afford to be cocky. Or maybe he genuinely loved his lord and wished to serve him till death. Whatever the reason, Nobunaga noticed his defiance. He pulled Mitsuhide aside and spoke to him in private. That night, Mitsuhide slept in a separate room. In the morning, he found his armor polished and his sword sharpened. He wondered if his lord had changed his mind. Would he get to die on the battlefield alongside his master? The following day, Nobunaga summoned him once more. There was no smile on his face. "Tell me, Mitsuhide, why do you serve me?" Mitsuhide did not hesitate. "To defeat the enemy and win victories for my lord." Nobunaga nodded. "Good answer. But that is not the only reason." "What do you mean? Do you think I will inherit the entire country?" Yes. Then you are a fool. The country is big. I alone cannot rule it. I need your help." Mitsuhisa bowed his head. "Forgive me. I do not understand." "You lack ambition," Nobunaga snapped, but the young man was quick to respond. "My ambition is to serve my lord and follow him to the grave." Nobunaga fell silent. After a while, he put a hand on Mitsuhide's shoulder. "Get up. You will join me on the battlefield today." From then on, Mitsuhide served Nobunaga with renewed vigor. In battle, he was the lord's right hand. Outside the battlefield, he was his confidant. Wherever Nobunaga went, Mitsuhide followed, fighting by his side, sharing his joys and sorrows. It seemed their relationship was beyond repair. Then in 1582, everything changed. On the 21st day of the 6th month, Akechi Mitsuhide raised an army against his lord. The first says that Mitsuhide searched for Nobunaga's severed head, found it, wrapped it in cloth, and burned it. When Nobunaga died, he left behind a 5-year-old son and several capable generals. Among them, Toyotomi Hideyoshi and Shibata Katsui. But how much of this is true? What really happened to Mitsuhide and why? The truth is, we don't know. We don't know what Mitsuhide thought in those final days. They burned books, and they killed people who wouldn't renounce the new religion. This was the main island of Japan. 1597. A Portuguese ship arrived carrying missionaries who had come to spread God's word. Over the next few decades, tens of thousands of Japanese men, women, and children became Christians. They built churches and they started schools. They translated the Bible into Japanese. One is a book called The History of the Japanese Church, written in the mid-1800s by a man who interviewed an 82-year-old woman named Maria Cruz. She had converted to Christianity around the age of 12. When she was 23, her village priest asked her to renounce her faith. Weddings were huge affairs. It lasted 3 days with dancing and singing. Funerals involved masses. And during the burial, people would cry out, "Live forever, soul of the departed, live forever in Jesus." After a person died, their family honored them for 3 years. By 1792, only 4 southern Japanese islands had any Christians at all. By the late 1700s, Christianity had gone underground in Japan. It was thought to be extinct. Schools were established, hospitals were built, orphans were cared for. The Catholic Church was officially re-established in Japan in 1865. The community it created was not the same as the one that had been destroyed. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking it. See you next time. But over the next few decades, it grew. Today, there are around 3 million Catholics in Japan. Around 1.2% of the population is Christian. And some of those Christians practice traditions that go back to the hidden Christians, the ones who kept the faith when everything was taken away from them. Not all of them, though. Some of those traditions have been lost. In the end, the Kokura Kirishitan managed to save themselves. They managed to preserve the essence of their faith. And in doing so, they managed to shape the future of Christianity in Japan. But some believers carried on the faith in secret, and their faith was rewarded. In 1859, Japan opened its borders again. Foreigners flooded in, and with them came the Bible. Soon missionaries and Japanese converts were meeting up again. They were ecstatic. The underground church was no more. Japan was open. They could worship freely. Every morning, the family would get up before sunrise and genuflect toward the direction of the grave. The Christians who had emerged from the shadows had changed. They had adapted. They had survived by blending in. Now they needed to blend back out. When priests arrived asking for donations so they could build new churches, they were refused. People were suspicious. They didn't want to draw attention to themselves. They had been burned too many times before. 8 missionaries arriving from Europe were shocked. Christians they met had abandoned many of their traditions. Instead of celebrating Christmas, they celebrated the festival of the Immaculate Conception of the Goddess. Instead of Easter, They celebrated the festival of the flower. Instead of the Virgin Mary, they venerated the goddess. Jesus wasn't exactly forgotten, but he was hidden behind layers of metaphor. Many statues of Jesus and Mary were taken and placed in temples where they were revered as Buddhist deities. Many villages still had the statue of Kannon, the Bodhisattva of mercy, and now they called her the Virgin. It just needed time to rediscover who they were. They would recall the virtues of the deceased and say prayers of intercession. Then they would light incense and bow. At noon, they did the same thing again. Finally, at sunset, they performed the ritual one more time. She refused, and so he had her tied up, suspended from a tree and beaten with sticks. Deacons and laypeople took on the duties of priests. Women gave up being wives and mothers to take on the role of pastor. Men left their jobs and families to become teachers. Many of the church's leaders were young, too young to remember a time when Christianity was legal. They had no choice but to fight for their faith. That meant they had to be cautious. During the day they lived one life, and at night they lived another. They prayed, read the Bible, and celebrated Mass in secret. They lived with fear every day. Someone might betray them. Someone might tattle. The slightest slip could bring the full force of the government down upon them. Her whole body was bruised and she lost the use of her legs. All it took was one accusation from a single person. That's why so many pretended to leave the faith. They conformed to the rituals and holidays of other religions, but at home they continued to pray. Families had to hide their crosses, their rosaries, and their Bibles. They couldn't display any images of Jesus or Mary. They couldn't ring bells, couldn't even speak English. Yet any one of these things could cause trouble. For centuries, the Kakure Kirashitan blended into the general population. They had to. If they hadn't, they probably would have been wiped out. Eventually, she was freed, but she spent the rest of her life in pain. According to Maria Cruz, during times of persecution, Christians would gather together and pray. Our Father who art in heaven was a favorite prayer, as was Save me, O God, for the waters are rising. When they gathered together, they sang songs with hidden meanings. Sometimes the lyrics were about everyday life, but the tunes were Christian. For example, when someone went to a market to buy fish, they might sing, "Oh, how I love to go fishing. Oh, what a big fish I have caught." Actually, they were saying, "Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, what a great Savior I have found." Prayers and rituals were said in hushed voices because if anyone outside the faith heard them, believers could be arrested. Everything seemed to be going well until suddenly it wasn't. Even houses of worship hidden away in caves or behind waterfalls were discovered and destroyed. So believers worshipped in secret. If they could find a quiet place outdoors, they might kneel and pray. When they were at home, they put statues of Buddhist gods on their altars and prayed to them. While pretending to be Buddhists, they kept icons of saints wrapped in cloth. Some families had statues of Jesus and Mary buried under their floors. They'd uncover the statue once everyone else was asleep, and then they would pray. On Sundays, they rang bells or beat drums so that the sound echoed through the mountains. This was their way of saying, "We are here." It was also their way of commemorating Jesus' resurrection. The year was 1639, and a new shogun was in power. He didn't like foreigners or Christianity. He began closing Japan off from the world. Foreigners were no longer allowed to enter the country. Japanese converts and missionaries who had been abroad were forbidden to return home, and converts were ordered to abandon their new faith. Those who refused were tortured. Their beards and eyebrows were shaved off. Hot pokers were plunged into their chests. They were crucified. They were boiled alive. Finally, they were killed. What followed were decades of brutal persecution. Churches and homes were searched. Others pretended to abandon Christianity. They participated in festivals to the gods of Shintoism. They celebrated the emperor's birthday. They conformed outwardly while harboring their faith inwardly. And after the threat of persecution had passed, many returned to their old ways. But there were some who never stopped believing. They were called Kakure Kirashitan, which literally means hidden Christians. This was a name given to them by outsiders. They referred to themselves simply as those who follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. How many there were is unknown. Some scholars estimate that as many as 500,000 Japanese were still practicing Christianity in secret. Images of Christ were destroyed. Priests and laypeople alike were tortured. Those who didn't leave Japan were executed, and those who did leave often faced starvation. And yet, despite all that, some people converted. Some fled into the mountains. There they hid in caves and made their homes underground. What we know about their beliefs and practices comes mainly from two sources. There was no room for public worship. No churches were built. Homes were too dangerous. On feast days, they celebrated with feasts. Food was shared, especially with the sick and the poor. When their priests were killed, they looked for new ones. Entire villages could be punished. Men, women, and children. 1683, 174 Japanese Christians were burned alive. But they were in for a surprise. It took years, but eventually churches were built and life returned to normal. The Kakure Kirishetten remind us that not all resistance is loud. Sometimes resistance is quiet, even invisible. But that doesn't make it any less powerful. Thank you for watching this episode of In a Minute. When most people think of ancient China, they think of emperors and warfare. They think of a bustling capital city, of armies on the march, of grand debates at court. It's all true enough, and yet there is another side to that history, a quieter side, a domestic side, and that too is essential to the story. He's a handsome guy, but more than that, he's cultured and artistic. Like his creator, he loves poetry and painting and music. In fact, the entire court is obsessed with these things. It's not just a backdrop, it's central to their lives. Of course, they're also obsessed with genealogy and status and social niceties. In fact, much of the book is taken up with marriages and courtships. For example, you never directly ask someone out on a date. Instead, you hinted at your interest. You dropped subtle clues. Unlike opera, where the actors are larger than life, Chinese theater relies on restraint and understatement. The same was true of their music. Musicians were expected to play softly, to let the notes hang in the air. This wasn't just about technical skill. It was about expressing yourself. It was a world of poetry and painting and calligraphy, of music and theater and dance, of tea and gardens and temples. It will help the algorithm. You can also check out my new podcast. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next week. It was a world that valued refinement and elegance, a world that found beauty in the everyday, a world that celebrated the human spirit. Music was a way of sharing your innermost thoughts and feelings. It was an integral part of court life. Musicians would perform at banquets and poetry readings. They would accompany dancers. They would even perform in the emperor's bedroom. It tried to catch their eye across a crowded room. It's about capturing the essence of the written word. Tea is more than just a beverage. It's a way of life. The entire ceremony is designed to promote inner peace and harmony with nature. Every step, from grinding the leaves to pouring the water, is infused with meaning. Tea drinking is a way of slowing down, of appreciating the present moment. It's a practice that dates back centuries. It was first mentioned in writing during the Warring States period, but it didn't become popular until the Tang dynasty. During the Song dynasty, tea drinking reached new heights. People would travel great distances to sample the finest teas. They would hold tea tastings and tea competitions, even wrote poetry about it. Calligraphers spend years honing their craft, studying the masters, copying their work. It's a meditative practice that requires focus and precision. It's also a highly personal one. Each stroke of the brush reveals something about the writer's personality, their state of mind. The whole thing was an elaborate game of hide and seek, a verbal and behavioral ballet. This is, after all, a world where women are largely confined to the domestic sphere. Their freedom of action is limited, so they exert their influence through marriage. A good match can greatly advance a family's interest. A bad one can ruin everything. So today, we enter the world of one of the most famous women in Chinese history, the gentle and graceful Lady Murasaki. Let me explain. Yet there is a kind of wildness beneath the surface. A small movement of the hand, a delicate brush stroke, a single note on the flute. And all of a sudden, the past 1,000 years melt away. We feel the heat of the midday sun. We hear the rustle of silk. We smell the pine and the sandalwood. We see plum blossoms and maple trees. We taste tea and wagashi. We enter a different kind of silence. Imagine yourself stepping into a Kyoto palace. The walls are made of screens. The scent of sandalwood hangs in the air. Much of it is preserved in small, seemingly insignificant details, like a cup of tea or a piece of calligraphy. What did they value? What were they afraid of? What gave their lives meaning? These are universal questions. In medieval Japan, the court loved two things: poetry and courtly love. Nothing was more romantic than a moonlit tryst or a secret rendezvous. Poets would meet under the guise of a poetry reading or a music recital. They would share their feelings through verse. If things went well, the affair might continue long after the music stopped. Unrequited love, on the other hand, was considered a noble and tragic subject. Poets would pen long, mournful verses about unreturned affection. They transcend time and culture. And nowhere is this more apparent than in the realm of courtly love. Some of it is hidden in plain sight, like the poetry inscribed on a tomb. Some of it only reveals itself over time, like a scroll painting. There is music, but it is quiet, played softly on a koto. You are a noble woman of the court. Your day is shaped by ritual. You rise slowly, bathe with care, dress in many layers of silk robes. Colors are chosen to reflect the season: pale plum for early spring, deep indigo for summer rains. You write poems on fans. You exchange letters with other ladies, delicately folded and perfumed. There is gossip. Yes, there are rivalries. But every word is measured. Every glance carries weight. You do not run. You glide. You do not shout. You suggest. Meals are taken in silence or in soft conversation. You eat with lacquered chopsticks and never finish the bullet would be impolite. Your role is limited, yet powerful. You can influence through marriage, through beauty, through grace. Outside the palace walls, battles rage. But here the world is paper-thin and delicately painted. Even boredom becomes ritual. You wait for letters, for moonlight, for the shifting of the wind. You are surrounded by servants, but you are often alone. Stillness is your station, and within it you find purpose. This is the world of the Tale of Genji, a novel written 1,000 years ago by an aristocratic woman named Murasaki Shikibu. She lived in the court of the emperor's son at a time when power was concentrated in the hands of the Fujiwara clan. Her life was comfortable. Her father held an important position, so she received a first-rate education. By the standards of the time, she was something of a trailblazer. She knew the classics. She could compose poetry. She was also very interested in art and music. And eventually, she became a lady in waiting to the empress, which is probably how she met her lover, the dashing young aristocrat, Fujiwara no Tashi. When he died, she was inconsolable. Perhaps in an effort to escape her grief, she created an entirely new world. In her novel, the main character is Prince Genji, the son of the emperor. The world of the Tale of Genji feels both familiar and strange. It's like stepping into a traditional Japanese garden. Everything is carefully ordered. Nothing is out of place. And the thing is, this kind of cultural richness can be found throughout Chinese history. You just have to know where to look. I love this stuff because it gives us a glimpse of what really mattered to people in the past. It helps us understand how they saw the world. Let's take a closer look. Now, the concept of courtly love originated in 12th century France, but similar themes can be found throughout history. Confucianism had little to say about romance, but it did insist on a certain decorum in all social interactions. Poetry was just one element of this world. There was also music, lots of it. Traditional Chinese music emphasizes subtlety and nuance. There was also calligraphy, an art form that requires great skill and patience. It's not just about writing pretty letters. But maybe the most quintessentially Chinese activity of all is drinking tea. In short, the world of pre-modern China was a rich and complex one. Thank you for watching this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking it. And so our quiet passage through feudal Japan draws to a close. You have walked through fields thick with water, watched a general weigh his fate, stood silently beside those who worship in whispers, and moved gently through corridors of courtly power. The rhythm of history is not always loud. Sometimes it flows like a hidden stream. As you rest now, remember, the past is full of lives that never sought glory, only survival, belief, or beauty. Let their rhythm ease your own. Sleep well, traveler of time. As you settle in for the night, allow your mind to wander backward, far, far backward in time. Past the rise of industry, beyond the fall of Rome, At dawn, its temple pyramids pierce a purple sky. Causeways stretch across the lake like great stone arms. And in the stillness of early morning, smoke from thousands of hearths curls softly into the air. Let it drift quietly into the heart of Mesoamerica, where the sun rises over a city built on water. Tenochtitlan, the shimmering island capital of the Aztec Empire. But this is not a land of rest, not for everyone. Let us begin at the bottom. With those who carry the weight of this vast empire, stone by stone, sack by sack. Welcome to Tenochtitlan. I'm your host. Today we will experience life in the great city of Tenochtitlan as an ordinary man. Let's get to it. The first rays of sunlight touch your eyelids and you wake slowly. Sunlight streams through cracks in the wall of your house and you blink away the sleep. She gave it to herself after a dream in which she was told she would fly. You worry about her. She has been listless for days. The midwife said it was the heat. You hope she'll be all right. You smile at her. You love her spirit, and you met she had nothing. She asks if you've seen the sunrise yet. She wants to take Citalali to show her the world waking up. You must go to the market, Tlatelolco, to trade your wares for sustenance. With a kiss and a hug, you leave them and head toward the city center. A wooden frame loaded with maize is bound tight across your shoulders. It weighs nearly 70 kilograms. It's a good load. It means you'll eat today. If you can finish your route, you walk the stone causeways that lead into the city. Each step is deliberate. In the misty distance, the temples loom like teeth. So you walk with them to the edge of the island city, the causeway bridge, and watch the sun crest the distant hills. They are members of the Jaguar Knights, the Emperor's personal bodyguard. You see a line of prisoners being pushed toward a nearby temple. They're naked except for ornaments through their noses and ears. Each prisoner holds a knife to his chest. A priest with a bloody obsidian-tipped staff urges them forward, and one of the prisoners stumbles and falls. The priest stabs him in the arm. Then you stand up and stretch your aching shoulders. You shake the maize from the frame and load it onto your back. 2 guards flank you, and you dare not look up. They're escorting you off the premises. You walk. The plaza opens before you and the path to your next destination lies ahead. You are ready to start again. You turn and walk away from the temple. You're tired and hungry, but you are almost done. Soon you will dump this load and pick up another going back to the country. Blood blossoms on his chest ornament, and the priest smiles. Thanks for playing. You shudder. You don't want to be anywhere near this group. You turn and hurry on your way. You have been carrying loads like this since you were old enough to walk. You have calluses on your shoulders. Okay. The weight of the maize makes your vision swim. You sway on your feet and bring your hands up to steady yourself. Their leader wears a headdress made of jaguar skins and a coat of shining red down feathers. Presence is intimidating. You lower your gaze. She calls out to you and offers to sell you some. You decline, but she insists. She puts a handful of berries into your palm. You hesitate, then close your fingers around them. You have earned this. You sit down on a nearby stone, ignoring the accusing looks from the guards, and eat the fruit. Sweet juice runs down your chin. It tastes like heaven. You wipe your mouth on your tunic and stand up. You are just a porter. You avert your gaze, refusing to acknowledge the imposing structure, because if you look up, you will see the terrible spectacle atop its peak. You have heard rumors. Rumors of captives dragged to the top of the pyramid. Rumors of hearts ripped from chests. Rumors of bodies flung into the crowd. But you do not want to believe those stories. You tell yourself they are just stories. Animals are not used as beasts of burden here. No horses or oxen haul carts or wagons. There are no paved roads. Everything is carried on backs, including your goods. Packs are carried in a wooden frame strapped to the porter's forehead, and they can carry up to 100 kilos. Slow, steady, ominous. The sound makes you uneasy. Where's it coming from? You hear it chanting now, too. The rhythmic pounding of feet. You grunt as you set down your load. He nods his head slightly. You are nothing to him. He turns back to the ceremony before you. He looks like a bird, all puffed up. His feathered headdress rises in a towering crest. His face is hidden behind a mask of green wood. You shrink away from him. He could cut you like the captive on the painting, but he doesn't seem to notice you. He turns back to the ceremony. You crane your neck to try to get a glimpse of what is happening ahead, but you dare not stop. You are a porter. You must deliver your load. Those miraculous floating gardens where farmers grow beans, squash, and amaranth in orderly rows. You pass vendors. Some call out to you, asking if you want to buy anything. You think about how nice a cup of hot chocolate would be. Would be nice, though, to find a shortcut through the city, maybe to the east side where you can dump your load and pick up another going back to the country. You know there are secret paths that cut through the city, but you have never dared use them. The shortcuts belong to thieves. To be caught on one of these paths with stolen goods would mean being thrown into the dreaded temple dungeons, or worse, being sacrificed to the gods. You keep your eyes downcast. Merchants have no time for porters. You are background infrastructure. The empire does not run without you, but it does not honor you. Every day, thousands of porters traverse the causeway bridges that connect the islands. This is your job. You are a tlamam, a porter. From here, you can see other islands. Tenochtitlan is built on 6 of them. It's all around you. Fires are lit, and people begin to stir. Your wife Chamali is already up. She is washing clothes in the courtyard. It is larger than any city square in Europe, surrounded by a colonnaded arcade. You keep your eyes downcast. The nobles and priests who frequent this square might think it rude if a commoner meets their gaze. You help where you can, and when the clothes are clean, you hang them on lines made of agave fiber strung between the walls of your compound. But her dreams and a bundle of herbs growing on the roof of her parents' house. She knew their uses, and with those herbs, she began to make money. She now has enough to start her own small business. You are proud of her. You have no blankets to pull up, no sheets between you and the earthen floor. You are glad for the warmth of another body curled beside you. You think of corn cakes grilling over the fire, the taste of fish from Lake Texcoco, the feel of the water on your skin during the ritual bath last night. Life is good. See your companion stirs and she reaches out to you, her hand warm and sure. You take it. Her name means butterfly. When she went to find water last night, you stayed behind to guard your sleeping baby daughter, whom you've named Sidalali, Little Star. You slip out of your hammock, careful not to wake the others in your family compound. Soon Butterfly is up too, with Sidalali strapped to her back. Your stomach growls. You haven't eaten since yesterday afternoon, but there is no food here. As you walk, you dodge pedestrians and traffic. The straps bite your forehead as you rise to standing. Along the way, the ground is damp with overnight rain, and the smell of fresh-cut flowers wafts from the chinampas. After an hour, you enter the main square, Tlatelolco, where all roads meet. You pass 2 men unloading packs from a canoe. They're piled high with cacao beans, one of the most valuable commodities on Earth. You continue on, weaving through the crowd. You see a group of elite warriors dressed in fine cotton tunics, and quilted cotton armor adorned with eagle feathers and jewels. There is a commotion near the palace. You are almost to the temple when you hear a drumbeat. As you round a bend, you come upon a massive pyramid rising before you. You climb the pyramid steps and approach the waiting priest. You wait a long moment until the banging of drums and chanting begins to fade into the distance. This is where you always turn, but this time you hear footsteps behind you. The journey seems longer this time. The sun beats down on your neck and your arms ache. You see a woman squatting by the roadside with a basket of fruit. The guards are gone, and you follow the road toward the east side of the island city, dodging pedestrians and traffic. And that's the end of part 2. Join us next time for part 3, where you'll get to experience life in the great city of Tenochtitlan as a merchant. The first thing we should do when telling this story is to establish some parameters, because there are many characters who've played important roles in the conquest of Mexico, and we could easily get confused if we don't take some precautions. Let us turn away from the dust-covered backs of the porters and look to the royal palace. The sun hangs golden in the sky. It is 1519, the year of change. Moctezuma, Zocoyotes, Moctezuma, rises with the dawn. He is tall, reserved. First of all, it is an example of how even in Nahua languages, the language of the Mexica, there is no distinction between the 2 terms Moctezuma, I, and successor will be referred to as Moctezuma I. And the reason we do so is simple. Even though the name isn't spelled differently in Nahuatl, it is in Spanish. Warriors clad in strange armor, pale as death, and with eyes like burning coals. Their ships, terrifying monsters made of wood and canvas, taller than any pyramid and wider than 4 houses side by side. They came bearing messages from a bearded god who demanded tribute and submission. God, Montezuma felt a mixture of pity and scorn. The Spaniards, with their pale skin and strange customs, were a constant reminder of the omens the emperor had been ignoring. The gods were angry. Whispers turned to murmurs, then to shouts. The emperor's advisors urged caution, but the people's anger was growing louder. The streets echoed with chants demanding the expulsion of the foreigners. Outside the palace, the wind howled, carrying with it the smell of rain and rebellion. Tenochtitlan was a tinderbox, ready to ignite. If you want to read part 2, click here. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share this link with your friends. Thank you for reading. The emperor's mind raced, searching for a solution, but found none. The fate of his city, perhaps of all Mesoamerica, hung precariously in the balance. In the grand palace, Montezuma paced restlessly, his mind a battleground of uncertainty. Should he trust these pale-skinned strangers, or heed the warnings of his people? The sun beat down on Tenochtitlan, but a chill wind had begun to stir, carrying with it the scent of rebellion and change. How could these foreigners claim to be divine when they looked so frail? Faces were grim, their voices echoing the city's unrest. "You have kept us in darkness," boomed a noble, his voice shaking with anger, hiding the truth about these invaders. "They bring disease and death wherever they go. They desecrate our temples and mock our gods. No longer can we endure their presence." The emperor stared ahead, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. He knew the truth of their accusations. The Spaniards had indeed caused suffering and death. Their very touch seemed to wither the land. Their disregard for the Mexican religion was evident. Yet he had hoped for peace, for understanding. With a wave of his hand, he allowed them to rise. Either we expel the Spaniards, risking war and chaos, or we seek common ground, hoping for understanding. My heart tells me to expel them, but my mind urges caution. The nobles murmured among themselves, their voices a low rumble of discontent. "You fear war," sneered another noble. "But what is greater, war or dishonor?" His words hung in the air like a challenge. The emperor clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. He understood their anger, their fear, but he had seen the power the Spaniards wielded. To expel them without preparation would invite disaster. The crowd roared its approval, but the emperor could not shake off the feeling that a shadow had fallen over his city. The emperor felt a chill crawl up his spine. Though he trusted his warriors, the soothsayer's warnings echoed in his ears. Giants from across the sea. The historical records show that the Spanish chroniclers knew the difference and used different spellings to refer to these two rulers. He groomed himself in the finest garments, adorned his head with the most precious jewels, and waited patiently for the visitors to arrive. At dawn, a herald announced their coming. Afar, the emperor saw the column of smoke rising from the boats. He mounted the high platform overlooking the harbor and watched as the flotilla approached. The sight that greeted him was unlike anything he had seen before. Monstrous ships gliding effortlessly through the waves. Men with skin the color of ashes and faces hidden behind terrifying masks. As the ships drew closer, fear tightened its grip on his chest. Their numbers seemed endless. The stench of decay and sickness wafted towards him, mingling with the cries of the sailors. The same is true of the name Tizak. These were not the gods he had heard about in his dreams. They were flesh and blood, sickness and steel. The following days were a blur of rituals and festivities. The emperor received them in the grand plaza of Tenochtitlan, where two pyramids stood proudly, silent witnesses to the grandeur of the Mexica. And one was dedicated to the war god Huitzilopochtli, fierce protector of the city. The other to Tlaloc, god of rain and fertility, his face forever turned towards the heavens. Before them, a wide staircase led down into the bustling market, where merchants hawked their wares and life teemed with energy. The emperor, dressed in fine robes, walked slowly towards the waiting Spaniards, his steps heavy with foreboding. Even though in Nahuatl, it would be spelled the same way. When referring to the ruler of Texcoco in 1519, we will call him Tizak, while when referring to his successor, we will call him Tizak. In fact, The name is spelled differently in both cases. However, most historians writing in Nahuatl ignore this detail and use the same spelling for both. For the past few months, a comet had been traversing the sky. Its tail, a harbinger of misfortune, crossed the heavens for all to see. Lightning struck the great temple of Huitzilopochtli in the middle of the night, charring its peak and scattering its worshippers. And the most disturbing omen of all, the dreams that troubled the emperor's sleep. Dreams of fire and death, of monsters in the sky and giants from across the sea. Dreams that spoke of upheaval, of gods stirred from their eternal slumber. This leads to countless confusions, especially when dealing with events that took place in the 16th century, when the two rulers lived at the same time, and there was already a Nahuatl-speaking audience that understood the difference between the two terms. But those writing in Spanish didn't care about any of that. They just kept spelling both names the same way, a man born to rule. His palace is quiet today, but his mind is loud. For moons now omens have come, a comet, a temple struck by lightning, the strange dreams. And now strangers from across the sea, pale-bearded, clothed in strange metal. He does not know yet that they will unravel his world, but he senses it. The way the wind changes before a storm, he still wears the crown, still walks the long halls of his palace, still consults with priests, feeds the gods with incense, bathes in sacred water. But the city around him has begun to shift. Whispers in the marketplace, murmurs from the nobility. The emperor grows cautious, then fearful, and then arrives. Therefore, we shall tell this tale from the perspective of the Mexica, or more specifically, from the perspective of the ruler of the Mexica, Moctezuma Xocoyotzin. As such, we shall call him Moctezuma II. And remember, he's not the only Moctezuma there is. There were several rulers who bore that name. We'll also try to avoid confusion regarding the names of places. So the capital of the Mexica will be called Tenochtitlan, not Tenochtitlan. That's how the Spanish conquerors themselves wrote it. And the region known as Anahuac, because that's what the Mexica called it, will be referred to as Mesoamerica. Now that we have settled that, let us begin. Let us lift our gaze. The Spaniards are led into the city like honored guests. Moctezuma receives them. Gifts are exchanged. Words through trembling translators, he offers them residence. He does not yet see that he has become their prisoner. What follows is humiliation, confusion, the Aztec people furious. Tensions rise like steam in the midday heat, and then it happens. La Noche Triste. The sad night. But before that, before the blood and smoke, there is silence. Moctezuma stands on a balcony, pleads with his people to stop the attack. Stones fly. Some say he was struck by his own people. Others say he was killed by the Spaniards. What is certain is that by morning, he was dead. The sun rose, but not for him. The question of whether Moctezuma II was killed by his own people or by the Spaniards is a complicated one, which reveals a lot about the preconceived ideas with which we approach history. So let us start over. When referring to the ruler of the Mexica in 1519, we will call him Moctezuma II, while his nephew, with that out of the way. Let us go back to the year of our Lord, 1519, a year of sorrow for the Mexica. When the messengers returned from their reconnaissance in the province of Tabasco, the emperor's heart grew heavy. The information they brought back did not bode well. Still, it was necessary to receive them with honors. As the strangers stepped onto land, the emperor's heart sank. The leader among them, a man named Cortez, knelt before the emperor, presenting him with gifts and paying homage to his beard. In the weeks that followed, tension grew like a dark cloud over Tenochtitlan. One evening, as the sky blazed with the colors of the setting sun, a delegation of nobles confronted the emperor. "We are at a crossroads," he finally said, his voice heavy with the weight of his decision. As the night deepened, the debate raged on, the nobles' voices echoing the turmoil in the emperor's soul. And with that, we reached the end of part 1 of this story. A long time ago, deep in the heart of Mexico City, an ancient civilization flourished. They built towering pyramids and palaces adorned with intricate carvings, that beneath the bustling streets and vibrant plazas lies a hidden world, a secret city frozen in time. Welcome to my channel. They constructed buildings from volcanic rock and stucco, which they cut into huge blocks using sophisticated tools. The result was a stunning metropolis with wide avenues and spacious plazas. The streets were straight and lined with trees. There were large open spaces where people could gather, and the buildings were made of stone. In the 18th century, the city was surrounded by a wall that enclosed an area of about 24 square kilometers. The wall had 10 gates, each named after a different saint. Today, the city of Mexico is much larger, covers an area of over 1,500 square kilometers, and has a population of over 3 million people. When the Spanish arrived in Tenochtitlan, they were appalled by the sight of the marketplace. They saw it as a pagan temple, and they began to destroy it. They found the remains of several buildings, as well as artifacts such as pottery and tools. You stop to admire a colonial-era church, its ornate facade, a testament to the city's rich history. A staircase carved into the basalt rock. You reach out and touch it, feeling the rough texture of the stone beneath your fingers. Suddenly you hear a rumble, and the ground begins to shake. They seem to be dressed in the traditional clothing of the Aztecs, and they are speaking in a language you don't understand. You try to communicate with them, but they seem to ignore you as if you're not there. You realize that you are invisible to them, and you can't help but feel a sense of loneliness. You continue to explore the ruins of Tenochtitlan, uncovering more secrets of the lost city. You find evidence of the Aztecs' advanced engineering and architecture, as well as their complex religious beliefs and practices. But as the sun begins to set, you start to feel uneasy. The shadows grow longer, and the silence of the city is broken only by the sound of the wind. You decide to leave, but as you turn to go, you realize that the entrance to the city has disappeared. You are trapped in Tenochtitlan. You stumble back, afraid of what might happen next. The rumble grows louder, and the ground shakes violently. The city seems to be a maze, and you are lost forever. Just when you think all hope is lost, you see a glimmer of light in the distance. You run toward it, hoping it will lead you out of the city. But as you approach, you realize it's just another illusion. You're trapped in Tenochtitlan, doomed to wander its empty streets forever. You look around in terror as the buildings around you begin to crumble and collapse. I hope you enjoyed this journey through time and learned something new about the rich history of Tenochtitlan. If you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Then, as quickly as it began, it stops. But what if I told you that beneath your feet lies a hidden world, a secret city frozen in time? The opening is dark and mysterious, and you can hear the sound of rushing water. You pull out your phone and shine the light down into the hole. The beam of light reveals a breathtaking sight. Before you lies the lost city of Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire. You can see the bustling marketplace, the towering pyramids, and the shimmering canals. The city is alive with activity, and you can almost hear the sounds of the Aztecs going about their daily lives. You can see merchants selling their wares, children playing, and priests performing religious ceremonies. You feel a sense of wonder and awe as you realize that you have stumbled upon a lost world. This is a place where time has stood still, and you are the only living person who knows of its existence. You decide to explore further and descend into the opening. As you do, the ground rumbles again, and the entrance begins to collapse. You hurry through the passageway, desperate to escape before it's too late. You emerge out of the ground and find yourself in a clearing. Around you are the ruins of Tenochtitlan. The city is in ruins, and you are the only person there. You walk among the crumbling buildings, exploring the secrets of the lost city. You find artifacts such as pottery, tools, and weapons. You can see that the Aztecs were a sophisticated and advanced civilization. They had a complex social structure, a highly developed religion, and a deep understanding of astronomy and mathematics. Come across a pyramid and climb to the top. From here, you can see the entire city of Tenochtitlan. You can see the bustling marketplace, the towering temples, and the shimmering canals. You realize that this was once a great and powerful city, and you can't help but feel a sense of sadness for the people who lived here so long ago. You look down and see a crack in the pavement. Could there be something beneath it? A secret passageway, perhaps? Or maybe an entire city? This evidence has helped to paint a more complete picture of life in Tenochtitlan. The marketplace was a vital part of the city's economy and culture, and it's important to understand how it functioned. But the discovery of the marketplace is only one piece of the puzzle. To truly understand Tenochtitlan, we need to uncover all of its secrets. we need to explore the ruins of the city and bring them back to life. The Spanish conquistadors were led by Hernán Cortés, and they arrived in Tenochtitlan in 1519. Cortés was determined to conquer the Aztecs, and he wasted no time in getting started. He and his men began to attack the Aztec settlements, and they quickly made progress. The Spanish had superior weapons and armor, and they were able to defeat the Aztecs in battle. Cortés also used his knowledge of the Aztec culture against them. He had learned Nahuatl, the Aztec language, and he used this knowledge to manipulate the Aztec nobility. Cortés was able to convince some of the Aztec nobles to join him in his fight against the empire. And with their help, he was able to capture the city of Tenochtitlan in 1521. The city is still growing and changing, but it's hard to imagine that there was ever a time when it didn't exist. They destroyed the stalls and shops, and they also tore down the temples and shrines. They then rebuilt the city in their own image, and the marketplace was no more. Today, the only evidence of the marketplace is a single stone monolith that stands in the middle of the Plaza Mayor. The monolith is all that remains of the great temple of Tenochtitlan, and it's a reminder of the rich culture that once thrived here. The Spanish were stunned by the beauty of the city and its people, and they named it Mexico City. They were forced to work in the mines and plantations of the Spanish, and many died of diseases brought over from Europe. The Spanish also imposed a strict racial hierarchy on Mexican society. The Spanish were at the top of the hierarchy, followed by the mestizos, or people of mixed Spanish and indigenous ancestry. At the bottom were the indigenous people who were considered inferior and were denied basic rights. This racial hierarchy lasted for centuries and had a lasting impact on Mexican society. It was until the 20th century that the Mexican government began to take steps to address the inequality. However, they soon began to change the city in their own image. They tore down some of the native buildings and replaced them with Spanish-style homes. They also built churches and converted many of the natives to Christianity. Over time, the Spanish influence became so strong that the native culture was almost completely erased. The great temple of Tenochtitlan, also called the Templo Mayor, was one of the most important religious sites in the city. It was dedicated to the Aztec gods and was a center of religious life for the people of Tenochtitlan. The temple was massive, with two main structures, each dedicated to a different god. It's located in the historic center of the city and is surrounded by important government buildings, including the National Palace and the Metropolitan Cathedral. The square is also home to several important monuments, including the statue of Charles V, the first Habsburg emperor. But few people know that this grand plaza was once the site of a bustling Aztec marketplace. The marketplace was an important part of life in Tenochtitlan. It was here that the Aztecs traded goods and services, and it was also a place where people gathered to socialize and do business. The marketplace was filled with a variety of goods, including food, clothing, and jewelry. The Aztecs were skilled artisans, and they produced beautiful jewelry and other items that were in high demand throughout Mesoamerica. The marketplace was also a hub of activity for traders from other cultures. People from as far away as China and Italy came to Tenochtitlan to trade their goods. The atmosphere of the marketplace was lively and colorful. The Aztecs were known for their love of music and dance, and there was often live entertainment. The marketplace was also a place of religion. There were several temples and shrines located within the marketplace, and the Aztecs used it as an opportunity to worship their gods. The structure dedicated to the rain god, Tlaloc, was rectangular and had a staircase leading up to a flat roof. The structure dedicated to the war god, Huitzilopochtli, was circular and had a stepped pyramid leading to a small chamber at the top. And today we're going to explore what would happen if we uncovered every last bit of the ancient city and brought it back to life. What secrets might it hold? What stories would it tell us about the people who lived here so long ago? Join me on this journey through time as we discover the forgotten history of Tenochtitlan. They established a bustling marketplace filled with merchants and artisans. This was Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire. It was a thriving metropolis surrounded by canals and dotted with temples. But today there's no trace of any of this left, or is there? The Spanish were eager to erase all traces of the Aztec religion and culture, and they saw the great temple as a symbol of the old religion. They demolished the structure and used the stones to build a new church. The exact location of the temple is not known. But excavations in the 1970s and 80s revealed the foundations of several temples and palaces, including a possible location for the Great Temple. The team also found a ball court, a marketplace, and a canal system. They also uncovered artifacts such as pottery, tools, and weapons. What if I told you that the city you see around you was actually built over the ruins of Tenochtitlan? The Aztecs were known for their impressive architecture and engineering skills. But as the Aztec Empire declined and the Spanish conquistadors arrived, the Great Temple was destroyed. When the Spanish began exploring and conquering the Valley of Mexico in the early 16th century, they came across a magnificent city. As Mexico City grew, it expanded beyond the original boundaries of Tenochtitlan. After the Spanish conquest, the indigenous people of Mexico City were subjected to a brutal regime. Today, the Plaza Mayor is one of the most important squares in Mexico City. However, the Spanish conquistadors did not share the Aztecs' love of culture, and they quickly set about destroying it. Once the Spanish had conquered Tenochtitlan, they began to dismantle the marketplace. In recent years, archaeologists have uncovered more evidence of the Aztec marketplace. Imagine walking down a busy street in Mexico City. The air is filled with the sounds of traffic and people going about their daily lives. As you peer into the darkness, you see something that makes your heart skip a beat. You cautiously approach the gaping hole in the ground and peer inside. As you explore further, you come across a group of people. You panic, running around the city, desperately searching for a way out. But no matter where you go, you can't find the entrance. And that's our exploration of what would happen if we uncovered every last bit of the ancient city and brought it back to life. It's 1519, and you are about to enter one of the largest cities in the world. It is here that the Aztec king Moctezuma received Spanish conquistadors, who have crossed the ocean and climbed the tallest mountains to get to him. And all that stands between you and an audience with the greatest monarch in the New World is a guard dog and a jaguar. In fact, that's probably a good time to mention that you are about to be playing as a noble courtier in the great city of Tenochtitlan. Your goal will be to use your influence and cunning to grow your power base and see how much of the empire you can control. Here in Tenochtitlan, the most common material for armor is the quilted cotton armor. Compared to European plate armor, it's not as protective, but it's lighter, cheaper, and pretty effective at stopping arrows. Of course, if you want to stay alive during an assassination attempt, you should probably invest in some body armor made of quilted cotton mixed with leather and metal. In fact, the head priest of Huitzilopochtli's temple controls almost as much power as the king himself. Unlike Europeans, who inherited their estates from their fathers, Aztec nobles often had to earn their land. Most commoners owned small plots of land, but large estates were reserved for the nobility. Owning an estate meant having your own farms, producing food for the city, raising cattle, and building workshops. Will you become a great lord and amass a fortune, or will you be remembered only by your enemies? Only time will tell. More importantly, though, it meant having your own warriors, which was essential for expanding your influence in the city. Landowners often used their warriors to back up their arguments in the court of public opinion. After all, it was not uncommon for rival nobles to challenge each other to a duel after insulting each other in the marketplace. So if you want to have any chance of growing your power, you need to buy or build your own estate. Just be sure to bring enough bodyguards. So naturally, he's been assassinated 3 times in the last 20 years. The most successful landlords in Tenochtitlan were those who diversified their holdings. They grew food on their estates, but they also invested in workshops and traded the products throughout the empire. Some landlords even had their own fleets of merchant ships sailing down the coast of Mexico. But if you aren't careful, your neighbors will undercut your prices and put you out of business. Because of the complexity of the economy, landlords often hired accountants to help keep track of everything. These accountants were usually former merchants who knew how to read and write. They played an important role in keeping the economy of Tenochtitlan running smoothly. In fact, these accountants weren't just number crunchers. They often doubled as advisors, helping their landlords navigate the treacherous waters of politics. If you want to get close to the seat of power, becoming a priest might be the way to go. And occasionally, angry mobs would attack your estate because your accountants miscalculated how much food you owed them. That's why some landlords hired bodyguards to protect themselves and their property. Bodyguards were usually former warriors who specialized in either combat or stealth. Stealthy bodyguards were useful for gathering intelligence on your rivals or sneaking into their estates to sabotage their operations. Combat bodyguards, on the other hand, were useful for well fighting. And since assassination was such a common occurrence in Tenochtitlan, you definitely needed someone to protect you. Just don't expect to stay there long. But no matter what you choose, protect yourself, because the streets of Tenochtitlan are not safe. Along the way, you will manage your estate, make alliances, launch assassination attempts, and generally try not to die. The king, Moctezuma, sits at the top of the social hierarchy. But below him are many important nobles, all vying for power and influence. If you side with one of the royal houses, your influence will increase. But if you cross them, you'll find yourself without many friends, without many enemies. You must tread carefully in the city of Tenochtitlan. One wrong move, and you'll find yourself escorted out of town by guards, perhaps permanently. So to help you do that last part, let's talk about weapons. Consider taking up residence in one of the many palaces scattered around the city. You will have servants to cater to your every whim, and enough luxury to make even a king blush. But the best part is the opportunity. The king needs capable administrators to keep his empire running smoothly. Got the prate, a carbon of cell. A word said well. Sure, there's always the risk of assassination, but the same thing happens back in Europe. Plus, the view from your palace window is amazing. Seriously, you have to get past those first. The warriors of Tenochtitlan are famous for their macuahuitl, a wooden sword with obsidian blades along the edge. To the Spaniards, these swords looked like sickles designed to cut a man open like a melon. However, to your average Tenochtitlan warrior, the macuahuitl is a tool of war. Skilled warriors can take out several opponents before needing to resharpen their blades. So whether you're defending your honor or defending your life, you need one of these things. The city is called Tenochtitlan, and it is beautiful. It has canals, just like Venice. It has pyramids, just like Egypt. And it has people who would kill you without hesitation. So you pay tribute to the gods of the dogs and the jaguars, whatever it takes to get into Tenochtitlan. Once through the gates, you feel safe. Maybe not exactly safe, but compared to the rest of the Aztec Empire, you are probably safer here in the capital. The air buzzes with commerce, gossip, and danger.
Ow.
This is where the goods of the empire converge. Merchants crowd the main square, hawking spices, flowers, chocolate, and slaves. Everyone here is watching everyone else. There are more noble families here than anywhere else. If you aren't careful, you might insult one of them. Unlike in Europe, where nobles were born to rule, Aztec nobles were earned. Meritocracy was the name of the game. And only the most cunning could reach the top of the social pyramid. To survive in this environment, you have to be quick-witted, charming, and carry a powerful weapon. Weapons are bought and sold like any other commodity, except they're often bloodier. Speaking of defense, what is a weapon without armor? One of the ways to avoid getting killed is to have allies in high places. Luckily, there are plenty of opportunities to build your influence in Tenochtitlan. And it isn't just palaces that offer opportunities. The temples of Tenochtitlan are even more opulent, and they have their own administrations to run. Of course, the biggest source of power in Tenochtitlan comes from owning land. And while the land is yours, you still have to watch out for other landowners. But even with a good accountant, managing your estate could be a risky proposition. Sometimes droughts ruined harvests. Other times flooding destroyed entire fields. As you can see, life in Tenochtitlan is full of dangers, but also opportunities. And you won't have to wait long, because the next episode premieres on November. Thanks for watching. And now, the city sleeps. The lake is still. Moonlight reflects off the canal waters. Somewhere, a flute plays. Songs hum beneath concrete. Stories live on in the quiet corners of history. Somewhere else, footsteps echo across stone. Tenochtitlan is gone, but it is not lost. Its stones lie buried beneath another city. You have walked its causeways, climbed its pyramids. Let the lake close behind you. Let the drums grow quiet. Dined with its nobles, and now you may rest. Let the sounds of the old city fade. Sleep well. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again.